Sometimes the people we think need saving end up saving us instead. Life has a way of putting angels in our path when we least expect them, even when they don't look like what we imagined. Eli Jameson was a single father, barely making ends meet in Cedar Falls, Colorado. When he found a homeless woman freezing behind his building, he told her she wouldn't last a day in the harsh winter. But something made him offer her shelter for one night. That woman was Rowan, and she would change his family forever. She had secrets that could heal his broken home or tear apart everything he'd worked to build. As the snow fell and one night became many, Rowan brought unexpected joy back into his daughter's life and stirred feelings in Eli's heart he thought were buried with his wife. But who was this mysterious woman really? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through Eli Jameson's restless sleep at 5:30 in the morning, just as it had every weekday for the past 2 years. He rolled over in the narrow bed, his calloused hand slapping the snooze button with practiced precision. The apartment was cold. He kept the thermostat low to save on heating bills, and his breath formed small clouds in the dim light filtering through threadbare curtains. Eli was 34, though the lines around his eyes and the premature grey threading through his dark hair made him look older. The mountains of Colorado were unforgiving, and so was the life he'd built there after Sarah died. He pulled himself from bed, his joints protesting from yesterday's 10-hour shift at Morrison Lumber Mill, and padded quietly down the narrow hallway to check on Maisie. His 8-year-old daughter lay curled beneath a patchwork quilt that Sarah had sewn during her pregnancy, her dark curls splayed across the pillow like spilled ink. On the nightstand beside her bed sat a drawing she'd made in Art Class 3 stick figures, holding hands in front of a house, Mommy, Daddy and Me, written in her careful second-grade handwriting. But Mommy's figure was lighter than the others, drawn in yellow crayon that had faded to near invisibility, as if she were already becoming a ghost. Eli's chest tightened as it did every morning when he saw that drawing. Maisie hadn't taken it down in over a year, despite creating dozens of new artwork that could have replaced it. She clung to that fading image of their complete family with the fierce hope that only children possess. He closed her door softly and made his way to the kitchen, where the coffee maquera wedding gift that had outlasted his marriage gurgled to life. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but it was clean and warm, and most importantly, it was theirs. The rent was reasonable by Cedar Falls standards, though it still consumed nearly half his paycheck from the mill. Cedar Falls wasn't much to look at, a town of barely 3,000 souls nestled in a valley between 2 mountain ranges. Main Street consisted of a grocery store, a diner, a gas station, and a handful of other businesses that struggled to stay open through the harsh winters. The lumber mill provided most of the decent-paying jobs, though decent was a relative term. Eli made enough to keep food on the table and the lights on, but not much more. As he sipped his coffee and stared out the frost-covered window, Eli could see the same view that greeted him every morning, the parking lot behind their building, where his 10-year-old pickup truck sat covered in snow, and beyond that, the skeletal remains of an old barn that had been abandoned for as long as anyone could remember. It wasn't beautiful, but it was predictable, and predictability was something Eli had learned to value above almost everything else. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway broke his reverie. Maisie appeared in the doorway, her hair a tangle of curls, and her favorite pajama spink with cartoon cats wrinkled from sleep. "Morning, sweetheart," Eli said, opening his arms for their daily hug. She rushed into them, still warm and soft from her bed, and he breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Is it really cold today?" she asked, peering out the window at the snow that had fallen overnight. "Pretty cold," he admitted, "but Mrs. Chen will pick you up after school, and I'll be home by 6. We'll make that mac and cheese you like." Maisie nodded solemnly. She was a serious child, more serious than any 8-year-old should be. The lightness that had once defined Hertha giggles and spontaneous songs that had filled their home had dimmed after Sarah's death. She still smiled, still laughed occasionally, But there was a carefulness to her now, as if she were afraid that too much joy might invite another tragedy. While Maisie ate her cereal, Eli packed their lunches in the brown paper bags he reused until they fell apart. A peanut butter sandwich for her, leftover meatloaf for him, and an apple they'd share when he picked her up from Mrs. Chen's house later. It wasn't gourmet, but it was nourishing, and that's what mattered. Mrs. Chen lived 3 blocks away in a house that had belonged to her family for 40 years. She was a widow herself, with grown children who lived in Denver and visited twice a year. She'd started watching Maisie not long after Sarah died, charging Eli far less than she could have gotten from other families. "Children need stability," she'd said in her matter-of-fact way. "Maisie has enough uncertainty in her life." At 7:15, they bundled into the pickup truck, the engine protesting against the cold before finally turning over. The heater took several minutes to start working, and by then they were already at Riverside Elementary, a squat brick building that served kindergarten through 5th grade. "Remember, Mrs. Chen picks you up at 3:30, Eli said, as Maisie gathered her backpack and lunch. "I remember, Daddy." She leaned over to kiss his cheek, a gesture that was both heartbreakingly adult and sweetly childish. "Will you help me with my math homework tonight?" Of course. Math was never Eli's strong suit, but he'd figured out 3rd grade arithmetic through sheer determination and YouTube videos he watched during his lunch breaks. As he watched her walk toward the school entrance, her small figure bundled in a coat that was slightly too big for her, Eli felt the familiar pang of inadequacy that followed him everywhere. Was he doing enough? Was he enough? Sarah had been the nurturing one, the one who knew instinctively what Maisie needed. Eli was still learning, still making it up as he went along. The drive to Morrison Lumber Mill took 20 minutes on a good day, longer when the mountain roads were icy. The mill sat on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of warehouses and processing buildings that had been the economic backbone of Cedar Falls for 3 generations. Eli had worked there for 12 years, starting as a general laborer fresh out of high school and gradually working his way up to equipment operator. It was steady work, honest work, but it was also backbreaking and dangerous. Every few months, someone got hurt a crushed finger, a back injury. Once a man had lost 2 toes when a log shifted unexpectedly. Tommy Reeves was already in the break room when Eli arrived, nursing a cup of coffee that looked strong enough to dissolve metal. Tommy was closer to 50 than 40, with graying hair and a permanent squint from years of working in sawdust and bright lights. He'd been at the mill longer than anyone except the owner, and he'd taken Eli under his wing during those first difficult months after Sarah's death. "You look like hell," Tommy said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too," Eli replied, pouring himself coffee from the communal pot that always tasted slightly burned. "Maisie keeping you up again?" Eli shook his head. "She slept fine. I'm the one who can't seem to turn my brain off." Tommy nodded, knowingly. He'd been through his own share of hardships: a divorce, a son who struggled with addiction, a mortgage that kept him working years past when he'd hoped to retire. "Worrying doesn't change anything," he said, though his tone wasn't unsympathetic. "Just makes you tired." The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of physical labor. Eli operated the forklift that moved lumber from the processing area to the loading docks, a job that required concentration and spatial awareness, but allowed his mind to wander. He thought about Maisie's math homework, about the groceries they needed, about the strange noise the truck had been making when he turned left. Small, manageable problems that he could solve with time and effort. It was during his lunch break, as he sat in the cab of his truck eating the meatloaf sandwich and trying to warm up, that his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Maisie seems tired today. Might be coming down with something. Nothing serious, but wanted you to know." Eli stared at the message, feeling the familiar spike of single-parent anxiety. Was she really getting sick, or was she just having one of her quiet days? Should he leave work early? Could he afford to leave work early? The mill didn't offer paid sick days for part-time family care, and missing a few hours of pay meant choosing between groceries and the heating bill. He texted back, "Thanks for letting me know. I'll pick her up as soon as I can." The afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Every few minutes, Eli found himself checking his phone, expecting another message from Mrs. Chen saying that Maisie's condition had worsened. By the time his shift ended at 5, he was practically running to his truck. Mrs. Chen's house was a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch and a garden that bloomed magnificently in spring and summer. Now, in the depths of December, it looked stark and dormant, but still maintained. She answered the door before he could knock, her weathered face creased with concern. "She's been very quiet, Mrs. Chen said, leading him into the living room where Maisie sat, curled on the couch with a picture book in her lap. Not sick, I don't think, but thoughtful, more than usual. Maisie looked up when her father entered, and Eli saw what Mrs. Chen meant. His daughter's eyes held a sadness that seemed too deep for her small face, a weight that no child should carry. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, sitting beside her on the couch. "How was school?" "Fine," she said, but she leaned into his side with an urgency that suggested otherwise. On the drive home, Eli tried to draw her out with questions about her classes, her friends, her teachers, but Maisie's responses were monosyllabic. It wasn't until they were sitting at their small kitchen table, sharing the promised mac and cheese, that she finally spoke up. "Daddy," she said, twirling noodles around her fork with unusual concentration, "do you think Mommy would be sad that we're sad?" The question hit Eli like a physical blow. He set down his fork and looked at his daughter, really looked at Herond, saw the toll that 2 years of grief had taken. She was pale, thinner than she should be, and there were shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many nights spent worrying about things beyond her control. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, reaching across the table to take her small hand in his larger one. "Mommy would want us to be happy. She would want us to remember her with joy, not sadness." "But I can't remember what her voice sounded like," Maisie whispered, tears starting to fall. "And sometimes I can't remember her face unless I look at pictures." Eli felt his own eyes burning. He came around the table and gathered Maisie into his arms, holding her while she cried against his chest. "It's okay to forget some things," he said softly. "What matters is that we remember how much she loved us and how much we loved her." After dinner, they settled on the couch together to work on her math homework, though neither of them was really concentrating on fractions. Maisie fell asleep against his shoulder while they were watching a nature documentary about penguins, and Eli carried her to bed, tucking the faded quilt around her small form. Back in the living room, he stood at the window looking out at the parking lot behind their building. The snow was falling again, thick flakes that caught the light from the street lamp and danced through the darkness. It was beautiful in its way, but Eli found himself thinking about the coming winter, not just the weather, but the long, dark months, when depression settled over the town like another layer of snow. He was about to turn away from the window when something caught his eye. There, huddled behind the dumpster at the far edge of the parking lot, was a figure. At first he thought it might be a pile of old clothes or discarded furniture, but then the figure moved, shifting position as if trying to find shelter from the wind. Eli grabbed his coat and boots and headed outside, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. As he got closer, he could see that it was a woman, probably middle-aged, wearing layers of clothing that looked inadequate for the weather. She had a small backpack beside her and was wrapped in what appeared to be a thin sleeping bag. "Ma'am," he called out, not wanting to startle her, "are you all right?" She looked up at him with eyes that were wary but not hostile. Even in the dim light, he could see that she was shivering violently. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'll move along if I'm bothering anyone." "You're not bothering anyone," Eli said, though he wondered if that was entirely true. "But you're going to freeze to death out here. This storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better." The woman Rowan, though he didn't know her name, yet studied his face for a long moment. "I've survived worse," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Eli looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her face that reminded him of Maisie's expression earlier that evening. A bone-deep weariness, a sadness that had settled into her very core. Against his better judgment, against every practical instinct he'd developed as a single father, barely keeping his head above water, he heard himself saying, "You won't last a day in this winter. But I've got a couch, and coffee's hot." One night, and in that moment, as snow continued to fall and a stranger's eyes filled with something that might have been hope, Eli Jameson made a decision that would change everything. Rowan followed Eli up the narrow staircase to his apartment, her movements careful and deliberate, as if she were trying to make herself as small as possible. She clutched her worn backpack to her chest and left damp footprints on the worn carpet, her boots squelching with each step. Inside the apartment, she stood just inside the doorway, taking in the modest space with eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail. The living room was small but clean, with a couch that had seen better days, a coffee table covered in Maisie's coloring books, and a television that was at least a decade old. Family photos lined a bookshelf that held more children's books than adult ones, and the whole place smelled faintly of coffee and the lavender fabric softener Eli used because Sarah had loved the scent. "You can put your things down," Eli said, suddenly aware of how the apartment must look to a stranger, not poor, exactly, but clearly the home of someone who counted every dollar. Rowan nodded, but didn't move to set down her backpack. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I won't be any trouble." Eli gestured toward the couch. "That pulls out into a bed. It's not much, but it's warm. Are you hungry? I think I've got some soup in the pantry." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. When's the last time you ate?" Rowan was quiet for so long that Eli thought she might not answer. Finally she said, "Yesterday, I think. Maybe the day before." While Eli heated a can of chicken noodle soup on the stove, Rowan remained standing in the living room, though she had finally set her backpack down. She was studying the family photos with an intensity that made Eli uncomfortable, though he couldn't say why. "That's my daughter, Maisie," he said, ladling soup into a bowl. "She's 8, and my wife Sarah." He paused, the words still difficult after 2 years. "She passed away." "I'm sorry," Rowan said, and something in her voice made Eli look up from the soup. Her face held a grief that seemed to match his own. "Thank you." He brought her the bowl and a sleeve of crackers. "She's sleeping now, Maisie. School night." Rowan accepted the soup with hands that shook slightly, though whether from cold or hunger, Eli couldn't tell. She ate slowly, methodically, as if she were afraid the food might disappear if she moved too quickly. "How long have you been out there?" Eli asked, settling into the chair across from her. "A few days, maybe a week." Rowan's voice was hoarse, and she kept her eyes on the soup. "Time gets away from you. What about family, friends?" The question seemed to cause her physical pain. She set down her spoon and folded her hands in her lap. "There's no one." Eli wanted to ask more how she'd ended up homeless, where she'd come from, what her story was, but something in her posture warned him off. She reminded him of a wounded animal, ready to flee at the first sign of threat. They sat in companionable silence while she finished the soup. Outside, the wind howled around the building, rattling the windows and making the old structure creak. The storm was getting worse, just as the weather report had predicted. "I'll get you some blankets," Eli said when she was done eating, "and there's a bathroom down the hall if you need it." "Thank you," Rowan said again. "I'll be gone first thing in the morning." But even as she said it, Eli could see the exhaustion in her face, the way her shoulders sagged with fatigue that went deeper than physical tiredness. She looked like someone who had been running for a very long time and had finally stopped, if only temporarily. He pulled sheets and blankets from the linen closet, breathing in the familiar scent of the detergent Sarah had always used. The smell still brought a pang of loss, but it was gentler now than it had been in those first raw months after her death. He showed Rowan how to pull out the sofa bed and left her to get settled while he checked on Maisie. His daughter was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant that had been a gift from her grandmother. In sleep, she looked younger than her 8 years, and the worry lines that had become too familiar smoothed away from her face. Eli adjusted her covers and kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her hair. When he returned to the living room, Rowan was sitting on the edge of the open sofa bed, still fully dressed. She looked up when he entered, and he saw something in her eyes that he recognized the look of someone who had been disappointed so many times that kindness felt like a trap. "The storm's supposed to last through tomorrow," he said. "No point trying to travel in this weather. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. But I do have to work tomorrow, and Maisie has school. I leave around 7, and she catches the bus at 8:15. You're welcome to stay until the weather clears." Rowan nodded, though she still looked uncertain. "I'll help however I can. Cleaning, cooking, I'm good with those things." "Just rest," Eli said. "You look like you need it." He was turning to go when a small voice from the hallway stopped him. "Daddy?" Maisie stood in the doorway, her hair mussed from sleep and her pajamas wrinkled. She looked at Rowan with the frank curiosity that only children possess, showing no fear or judgment, only interest. "Hey, sweetheart, what are you doing up?" I heard voices. Maisie took a step into the room, her gaze never leaving Rowan. "Who's that?" Eli felt a moment of panic. How did you explain homelessness to an 8-year-old? How did you make a child understand that sometimes people had nowhere to go? "This is Rowan," he said carefully. "She's going to stay on our couch tonight because of the storm." "Like a sleepover?" Maisie's face brightened with the first genuine smile Eli had seen from her in weeks. "Sort of like that," Eli agreed. Maisie approached Rowan with the fearlessness of childhood. "I'm Maisie. I'm 8 years old, and I'm in 2nd grade. What's your name?" "Rowan," the woman said softly, and Eli was surprised to see something like a smile cross her weathered features. "It's very nice to meet you, Maisie." "That's a pretty name. Like the tree?" "Yes, like the tree. My teacher says Rowan trees have magic in them. They protect people from bad things." Rowan's smile widened slightly. "Your teacher sounds very wise." "Are you cold? You look cold. Daddy, can we give her some of Mommy's clothes? They're still in the closet." The innocent suggestion hit Eli like a physical blow. Sarah's clothes had been hanging untouched in their bedroom closet for 2 years, waiting for him to find the strength to pack them away. He'd tried several times, had even gotten as far as pulling out boxes, but he'd never been able to go through with it. "That's very thoughtful, sweetheart," he managed, "but I think Rowan's clothes will be fine once they dry out." But Maisie had already moved on, settling herself cross-legged on the floor in front of the sofa bed. "Do you have kids?" she asked Rowan. The question seemed to cause Rowan physical pain. Her face went pale, and her hands clenched in her lap. She started, then stopped. No children." "I bet you'd be a good mum," Maisie said with the matter-of-fact confidence of childhood. "You have kind eyes." "Maisie," Eli said gently, "Rowan's tired. Let's let her get some rest. Can she make breakfast with us tomorrow?" Eli looked at Rowan, who seemed as surprised by the invitation as he was. "If she wants to," he said carefully, "but only if she wants to." "I'd like that," Rowan said quietly, and Eli was struck by how much those 3 words seemed to cost her. After he'd gotten Maisie back to bed with promises that yes, Rowan would still be there in the morning, Eli returned to the living room to find Rowan sitting exactly where he'd left her, staring at something in her hands. As he got closer, he realized it was a photograph, creased and worn from handling. She looked up when she heard his footsteps and quickly tucked the photo back into her jacket pocket. "She's a special little girl," Rowan said. "She is. She's been through a lot, but she's resilient. Children are, more than adults sometimes." There was something in her voice, a weight of experience that made Eli curious. But before he could ask, Rowan stood and moved toward the small window that faced the parking lot. "The storm's getting worse," she observed. "Supposed to dump another foot before morning. You made the right choice coming inside." Rowan nodded, though she seemed lost in thought. Sometimes the right choice is the hardest one to make. Eli wasn't sure if she was talking about accepting his offer of shelter or something else entirely. "Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow will be better." As he headed toward his bedroom, he heard her voice, soft and uncertain. "Eli, thank you for everything." "You're welcome." But as he lay in his own bed, listening to the storm rage outside and thinking about the mysterious woman sleeping on his couch. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that he had just set something in motion that he didn't fully understand. There had been something in Rowan's eyes when Maisie asked about children, a pain so deep and raw that it had made him want to reach out and comfort her. Who was she? What had brought her to his doorstep on the worst night of the winter? And why did he already feel like letting her leave would be a mistake? In the living room, Rowan lay awake on the unfamiliar sofa bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of a family home, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a clock, the whisper of warm air through the heating vents. She hadn't been inside a real home in 8 months, and the normalcy of it was almost overwhelming. She thought about Maisie's innocent questions, about the way the little girl had looked at her with such open acceptance. When was the last time someone had looked at her like that? When was the last time someone had seen her as more than a problem to be solved or a threat to be avoided? Rowan pulled the worn photograph from her pocket and studied it in the dim light filtering through the curtains. A little girl with dark curls and bright eyes, laughing at something just outside the frame. Emma would have been 10 now, if she had lived. She would have been just 2 years older than Maisie. The thought brought the familiar stab of grief, sharp and breathtaking in its intensity. Rowan closed her eyes and tried to push the memory away, but it was too late. Emma's laughter echoed in her mind, mixing with the sound of screeching tires and shattering glass, the sounds that had haunted her dreams for 2 years. She shouldn't be here, shouldn't be accepting kindness from this man and his daughter. She didn't deserve warmth and safety and the simple comfort of a roof over her head. But she was so tired, tired of running, tired of sleeping in doorways and abandoned buildings, tired of the constant vigilance that homelessness required. Maybe just this once she could pretend. Maybe for one night she could imagine that she was someone else, someone who deserved the gift of human kindness. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small apartment, 3 broken souls slept under the same roof, each carrying their own grief, each unaware of how much their lives were about to change. Eli woke to the sound of quiet movement in the kitchen and the unfamiliar aroma of something that wasn't his usual instant coffee. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, he thought Sarah had gotten up early to make breakfast. Then reality settled over him like a cold blanket, and he remembered the woman sleeping on his couch. He padded to the kitchen in his pajamas and bare feet, stopping short when he saw Rowan standing at the stove. She had found his ancient coffee maker and somehow coaxed it into producing coffee that actually smelled appealing. More surprising still, she was scrambling eggs in a pan he'd forgotten he owned, and the kitchen table was set for 3. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to help. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. It's been a while since I cooked for anyone." Rowan looked different in the morning light. Her graying brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and though her clothes were still the layered, mismatched garments of someone without a permanent address, she moved around the kitchen with a confidence that suggested she'd once been very comfortable in domestic spaces. "Daddy?" Maisie appeared in the doorway, drawn by the unusual sounds and smells. Her face lit up when she saw Rowan. "You're still here?" "I'm still here," Rowan confirmed with a smile that transformed her entire face. "I thought I might make breakfast for you and your father, if that's all right." "Can I help?" "Of course. Would you like to set out the juice glasses?" Eli watched as his daughter eagerly began helping, chattering away about school and her friends and a book she was reading about dolphins. Rowan listened with genuine attention, asking questions and making comments that showed she was really hearing what Maisie said. It struck him that aside from Mrs. Chen, no adult had shown this kind of focused interest in his daughter since Sarah died. "The storm stopped," Maisie announced, peering out the window. "Look, everything's all white and sparkly." Indeed, the world outside looked transformed. The violent storm of the night before had given way to pristine snow that covered everything in sight, turning the ordinary parking lot into something magical. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. "It's beautiful," Rowan said, joining Maisie at the window. Like the whole world got a fresh start. "Daddy says snow is like a blanket for the earth," Maisie said. "It keeps things warm underneath so they can grow again in spring. Your daddy's very wise." Eli felt a flush of warmth at the simple compliment. When was the last time someone had called him wise? Sarah used to say things like that, but since her death, he'd felt anything but wise. Most days, he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water. They ate breakfast together, and Eli was struck by how natural it felt to have another adult at the table. Rowan asked Maisie about school, complimented her on a drawing she'd made of a winter scene, and even helped her practice spelling words for an upcoming test. She had a gentle way with children that spoke of experience, though she'd said she had no kids of her own. "I should get going," Eli said reluctantly when he noticed the time. "The roads will be a mess, and I can't afford to be late." "Of course," Rowan said immediately. "I'll get out of your way." "Actually," Maisie piped up, "couldn't Rowan stay until I get on the bus, just so she doesn't have to walk in all that snow?" Eli looked at Rowan, who seemed as surprised by the suggestion as he was. "I don't want to impose," she said. "It's not imposing. The buses might be running late anyway with all this snow, if you don't mind waiting with her." "I'd be happy to." As Eli got ready for work, he found himself listening to the sounds from the kitchen, Maisie's laughter, Rowan's gentle responses, the clink of dishes being washed. It was a soundtrack he'd almost forgotten, the music of a home where more than one person lived. He was pulling on his boots when Maisie ran up to him with something in her hands. "Look what Rowan helped me find," she said excitedly. In her palm was a small wooden bird, carved with delicate detail. Eli recognized it immediately had been Sarah's, a gift from her grandmother. He'd thought it was lost, packed away somewhere in the boxes of Sarah's things that he'd never been able to sort through. "Where did you find this?" he asked. "It was in the couch cushions," Maisie said. "Rowan said it looked lonely and needed to be displayed properly." Eli looked toward the kitchen, where Rowan was finishing the dishes. Had she been looking through their things? The thought made him uncomfortable, though he couldn't say why. The bird wasn't valuable, just a small keepsake that Sarah had treasured. "It's pretty, isn't it?" Maisie continued. "Rowan knows all about birds. She told me this is a robin, and robins are symbols of new beginnings." "Is that so?" "She knows lots of things. Did you know that robins can find their way home, even if they fly thousands of miles away? They have special navigation systems in their brains." Eli smiled, despite his unease. It had been a long time since he'd seen Maisie so animated about learning something new. "I have to go, sweetheart. Be good for Rowan, and I'll see you tonight." "Can Rowan make dinner too?" The question caught him off guard. "We'll see. That's up to Rowan." As he was leaving, Rowan appeared in the doorway with Maisie beside her. "Have a good day at work," she said. "Don't worry about anything here." "Thank you for everything." The drive to the mill was treacherous, with several cars already stuck in ditches and the snowplows struggling to keep up with the overnight accumulation. Eli's mind kept drifting back to the scene in his kitchen, the easy domesticity of it, the way Maisie had bloomed under Rowan's attention. Tommy was waiting for him in the break room, looking skeptical. "You're in a good mood for someone who drove through a blizzard to get to work," Tommy observed. "Am I?" "You're humming. I don't think I've heard you hum since Sarah died." Eli wasn't aware he'd been humming, but now that Tommy mentioned it, he realized he felt lighter somehow. The morning had been pleasant, normal in a way his mornings hadn't been for 2 years. "I helped someone last night," he said. "A woman who was caught in the storm. Let her sleep on the couch." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "A woman?" "It's not like that. She was homeless, freezing. What was I supposed to do? Let her die out there?" "Of course not. But you seem different today. Relaxed. Maybe I'm just glad the storm's over." But as the morning wore on, Eli found himself thinking about what was happening at home. Was Rowan still there? Had she gotten Maisie on the bus safely? The questions distracted him enough that he nearly missed a forklift signal, earning a sharp word from his supervisor. During his lunch break, he called the apartment landline. Rowan answered on the second ring. "Jameson residence." "It's Eli. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. Maisie got on the bus without any problems, though it was running about 20 minutes late because of the snow. And you're still there? There was a pause. I was just finishing up some cleaning. I found a few things that needed attention, a loose cabinet door, a clogged drain in the bathroom sink. I hope you don't mind. Eli felt a complex mix of gratitude and unease. He appreciated the help, but something about it felt invasive. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. It's the least I can do after your kindness. Well, thank you. I should be home around 6. I'll be gone by then. I don't want to overstay my welcome. You're not overstaying anything. The offer still stands. You can stay until the weather improves. Another pause. Are you sure? I'm sure. Maisie would be disappointed if you weren't there when she gets home from school. It was true, but it was also an excuse. The real reason he wanted her to stay was harder to admit, even to himself. For the first time in 2 years, his home had felt like a home this morning, instead of just a place where he and Maisie waited out their days. When he got home that evening, he could hear laughter from the living room before he even opened the door. He found Maisie and Rowan sitting on the floor, surrounded by puzzle pieces. They were working on a 1,000-piece landscape that Sarah had started years ago and never finished. "Daddy!" Maisie jumped up to hug him. "Look how much we got done. Rowan's really good at puzzles." "I can see that." The puzzle was nearly half completed, more progress than it had seen in the 2 years since Sarah's death. Rowan made mac and cheese for dinner, but it's different from the box kind. She made it from scratch, and it's really good. "I hope that's all right," Rowan said, standing up from the floor. "I found the ingredients in your pantry." "Of course it's all right. You didn't have to cook." "I wanted to. It gave me something to do." Over dinner, Maisie regaled them with stories from school, a playground argument that had been resolved, a new book in the class library, a science project about weather patterns that was due next week. Rowan listened with the same focused attention she'd shown that morning, asking follow-up questions and offering encouragement. "Can Rowan help me with my science project?" Maisie asked as they were clearing the dishes. "That's up to Rowan," Eli said. "I'd be happy to help," Rowan said. "What's the project about?" "We have to make a model of different types of clouds and explain how they form. I know a bit about meteorology. We could make it quite detailed if you'd like." As the evening progressed, Eli found himself observing Rowan more closely. She moved through his home with increasing comfort, but there was still something guarded about her, as if she were waiting for the other shoe to drop. She deflected personal questions with practiced ease, steering conversations back to Maisie or practical matters. It was only when Maisie was getting ready for bed that Eli caught a glimpse of something deeper. Rowan was helping his daughter organize her backpack for the next day when Maisie pulled out a small notebook. "This is where I write letters to my mom," Maisie said matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Patterson, my teacher, said writing letters to people we miss can help us feel better." Rowan's hands stilled on the backpack. "That's a beautiful idea. Sometimes I tell her about my day, and sometimes I ask her questions. Like yesterday, I asked her if she likes my new friend Emma, and if she thinks I'm getting good at multiplication. What do you think she would say? I think she'd say she likes all my friends because they make me happy, and that she's proud of me for working hard at math even though it's difficult." Rowan's voice was barely a whisper when she replied, "I think you're absolutely right." Later, after Maisie was asleep, Eli found Rowan sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring out the window at the snow-covered parking lot. She looked lost in thought, and there was a sadness in her expression that he recognized. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling into the chair across from her. She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten he was there. "Just thinking about the day. It's been nice, peaceful." "You're good with Maisie. Do you have experience with children?" The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She wrapped her hands around her tea mug and looked away. "Some. A long time ago." "Teaching?" "Something like that." She stood abruptly. "I should let you get some rest. You have work tomorrow." "Rowan," he said as she moved toward the living room, "you don't have to leave. Not yet." She paused in the doorway. "I can't stay forever, Eli." "I'm not asking you to stay forever. Just stay a little longer, until you figure out what comes next. She studied his face for a long moment, and he saw her internal struggle playing out in her expression shape, warring with caution, longing, battling with fear. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why are you being so kind to a stranger?" It was a fair question, and one he'd been asking himself. "Because Maisie hasn't smiled this much in 2 years. Because my house feels like a home again. And because everyone deserves a second chance." Rowan's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough. I know you're kind to children. I know you're grateful for help and willing to work for what you're given. I know you've been hurt, badly, and you're trying to find your way back from whatever happened to you. And if what happened was my fault, then you're exactly the kind of person who deserves forgiveness." In the living room, surrounded by the detritus of their shared evening puzzle pieces and coloring books and the lingering warmth of domestic life, Rowan made a decision that would change all their lives. "All right," she said quietly. "A few more days." 3 days became a week, and a week became something that felt dangerously close to permanent. Rowan had settled into the rhythms of the Jameson household with a grace that made it seem as though she'd always been there. She woke early to make coffee and breakfast, helped Maisie get ready for school, and was always there with a snack and a listening ear when the little girl came home each afternoon. The apartment itself had begun to transform under her quiet influence. The constantly dripping faucet in the bathroom had been fixed with a washer she'd somehow procured from the hardware store. The kitchen windows sparkled in a way they hadn't in months. Books were organized, surfaces cleared of clutter, and somehow the whole place felt warmer, more welcoming. But it was the change in Maisie that struck Eli most profoundly. His daughter had always been a bright child, but grief had muted her natural curiosity and enthusiasm. Now, with Rowan's gentle encouragement, she was blooming like a flower finally receiving adequate sunlight. "Look what Rowan taught me today," Maisie announced as Eli walked through the door on Friday evening. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a small block of wood, carefully working it with what appeared to be a carving tool. "Whoa, sweetheart, is that safe?" Eli asked, setting down his lunchbox and moving quickly to examine what she was doing. "It's perfectly safe," Rowan said from the stove, where she was stirring something that smelled like heaven. "It's just a butter knife that I dulled the edge on, and I'm supervising every cut." "She's making a whistle." Eli watched as Maisie carefully shaved thin curls of wood from the block, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Where did you learn wood carving?" "My father taught me when I was about Maisie's age," Rowan replied. "It's good for developing patience and fine motor skills." "And when it's done, I can call birds with it," Maisie added excitedly. "Rowan says different whistles make different sounds, and birds will come to investigate." "That's amazing, sweetheart." Eli found himself once again marveling at how much his daughter had learned in just a few days. "What else did you do today?" "We worked on my cloud project, and Rowan helped me understand fractions by using pie pieces, actual pie pieces from the apple pie she made. And she showed me how to press flowers between wax paper so they'll keep their colors." Eli looked around the kitchen and noticed several pieces of wax paper laid out on the counter, each containing delicate wildflowers that must have been gathered from the small patch of woods behind their building. "Where did you find flowers in December?" "Winter flowers," Rowan explained. "Dried seed heads, interesting bark patterns, evergreen sprigs. Beauty doesn't stop just because the season changes, it just becomes more subtle." As they sat down to dinner pot roast with vegetables that Rowan had somehow made on his modest budget, Eli found himself studying her face. She was probably in her early 40s, with laugh lines around her eyes and silver threads in her brown hair that caught the light when she moved. But there was something about her that seemed ageless, as if she possessed a kind of wisdom that came from experience rather than years. "How do you know so much?" Maisie asked, apparently thinking along similar lines. "About cooking and carving and flowers and everything." Rowan's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I've had many different jobs over the years. You pick things up." "What kind of jobs?" "All sorts. Office work, retail, food service." She took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. The important thing is that every job teaches you something, even if it's not what you expected to learn. Eli noticed how skillfully she deflected the personal questions, giving answers that were true but revealed nothing about her actual history. He was beginning to understand that Rowan had built walls around her past, and she wasn't ready to let anyone scale them yet. After dinner, they worked on the cloud project together, using cotton balls and cardboard to create models of cumulus, stratus, and cirrus formations. Rowan explained the science behind cloud formation with the kind of clear, engaging language that made complex concepts accessible to a child's mind. "How do you know so much about weather?" Eli asked. "I've always been interested in the natural world," Rowan replied, "understanding how things work, why they happen the way they do." "Were you a teacher?" The question hung in the air for a moment too long. "Not exactly," Rowan said finally. Later, after Maisie had gone to bed, clutching her half-finished whistle, Eli found Rowan in the living room working on the puzzle they'd started earlier in the week. She'd made significant progress, and the mountain landscape was beginning to emerge from the chaos of scattered pieces. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," Eli said, settling onto the couch beside her. "But I'm curious about your story. Not because I don't trust you," he added quickly, seeing her stiffen, "but because I care about you. Both of you, Maisie and I, care about you." Rowan's hands stilled on the puzzle pieces. "That's dangerous," she said quietly. "Caring about someone who might not be here tomorrow. Are you planning to leave tomorrow?" "I'm not planning anything. That's the problem." She picked up a piece of sky and turned it over in her fingers. "I haven't made plans in a very long time. I've just been surviving. Day to day, moment to moment." "What changed?" "This." She gestured around the room, taking in the puzzle, the books, the family photos, the warm lamplight that made everything feel safe and permanent. "This feels like living instead of just surviving, and I'd forgotten the difference." Eli felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heating system. "Then stay, keep living." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand. What are you running from, Rowan?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Myself, mostly. The person I used to be. The mistakes I made." She fit the sky piece into place with shaking fingers. "Some things can't be forgiven, Eli. Some people don't deserve second chances." "I don't believe that." "You don't know. I know you've been nothing but kind to my daughter. I know you've brought joy back into our home. I know that whatever happened in your past, you're a good person now, in this moment." Rowan's eyes filled with tears. "You see what you want to see." "I see what's there. Someone who makes my daughter laugh. Someone who fixes broken things and creates beauty out of ordinary moments. Someone who's been hurt, but hasn't let that hurt make her cruel." "Eli." She turned to face him fully, and he saw the war being fought behind her eyes. "I can't be what you need me to be. I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. You don't know who that is. Then show me." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. Eli found himself leaning closer, drawn by something he couldn't know, just attraction, though that was certainly part of it, but something deeper. A recognition, perhaps, of another wounded soul trying to find its way back to wholeness. Rowan's breath caught, and for a heartbeat he thought she might let him close the distance between them. Then she pulled back, the walls slamming down behind her eyes. "I should go to bed," she said, standing abruptly. "Tomorrow's Saturday. I could take Maisie to the park if the weather holds." "Rowan." "Good night, Eli." He watched her retreat to the living room, heard the soft sounds of her preparing the sofa bed. The moment of connection was gone, but the memory of it lingered in the air like perfume. The next morning brought a rare gift sunshine and temperatures warm enough to melt some of the accumulated snow. Maisie was beside herself with excitement at the prospect of going to the park, something that had been impossible during the worst of the winter weather. "Can we bring my whistle?" she asked as she bundled into her coat. "I want to try calling birds." "Of course," Rowan replied, tucking the small carved piece into Maisie's pocket. "But remember, we have to be patient. Birds are cautious creatures. Eli watched them from the kitchen window as they made their way across the slushy parking lot toward the small neighborhood park 3 blocks away. Maisie skipped ahead, then circled back to take Rowan's hand, chattering the entire time. Even from a distance, he could see the smile on Rowan's face, the way she bent her head to listen to his daughter's endless stream of observations and questions. He should have felt grateful for the quiet Saturday morning to himself. When was the last time he'd had a few hours with no responsibilities? But instead, he found himself restless, checking the clock every few minutes and wondering what they were doing. When they returned 2 hours later, both of them were flushed with cold and excitement. "Daddy, you should have seen it." Maisie burst through the door, barely pausing to kick off her boots. "The whistle really works." A cardinal came, and 2 chickadees, and Rowan taught me how to tell the difference between their calls. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. And we found tracks in the snow rabbit tracks and deer tracks and maybe fox tracks, though Rowan said it's hard to be sure because the snow was so soft. And she knows the names of all the trees, even when they don't have leaves." Eli looked at Rowan, who was hanging up her coat with a soft smile on her face. "Sounds like you had quite an adventure." "Maisie's a natural observer," Rowan said. "She notices things most people miss." "Can we go again tomorrow? Please, Daddy. If Rowan doesn't mind." "I'd love to," Rowan said quickly. "There's supposed to be a meteor shower tomorrow night. If it's clear, we might be able to see it from the park." "Really?" Maisie's eyes were round with wonder. "Actual shooting stars?" "Actual shooting stars." That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table working on a jigsaw puzzle of the solar system, Eli found himself studying Rowan's profile in the lamplight. There was something different about her today, something lighter. The wariness that had defined her first week with them seemed to be slowly melting away, like snow in sunshine. "Rowan," Maisie said suddenly, "are you going to stay with us forever?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Rowan's hands stilled on the puzzle pieces, and Eli saw the familiar panic flicker across her features. "Forever is a very long time, sweetheart," she said carefully. "But you like it here, don't you? And we like having you here. And Daddy smiles more when you're around." Eli felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Maisie, it's true." His daughter continued with the devastating honesty of childhood. "You were sad before, and now you're happy. And I'm happy too. Happier than I've been since Mommy died." The words hit Eli like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because they were so completely true. He looked at Rowan and saw his own surprise reflected in her eyes. "Your daddy and I are just friends, Maisie," Rowan said gently. "But friendship is a wonderful thing. The best kind of friends take care of each other," Maisie said with 8-year-old wisdom. "Like you take care of us, and we take care of you." Later, after Maisie had gone to bed, Eli found Rowan standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the star-filled sky. "Clear night," she observed. "Perfect for meteor watching tomorrow." "Rowan, about what Maisie said. She's a perceptive child. Is she right? Are you happier here?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "I'd forgotten what happiness felt like," she said finally. "I thought I didn't deserve it anymore." "Why?" She turned from the window to face him, and in her eyes he saw a depth of pain that made his heart ache. "Because I destroyed everything good in my life," she whispered. "Because I failed the one person who mattered most to me. Because I'm not the woman you think I am." "Then tell me who you are." She shook her head. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." For a moment, he thought she might. He saw her gathering her courage, preparing to let him pass those carefully constructed walls. Then her phone buzzed from the counter where she'd left it, and the spell was broken. She glanced at the screen and went very still. The caller ID showed only a number, but something about it made her face go pale. "I have to take this," she said, moving toward the living room. "Rowan, please, just give me a minute." Eli watched her disappear around the corner, heard the soft sound of her voice but couldn't make out the words. When she returned a few minutes later, she looked shaken. "Everything all right?" "Fine," she said, but her hands were trembling as she picked up her tea mug. "Just someone I used to know." "Bad news?" "No news. just a reminder that the past doesn't stay buried forever. That night, Eli lay awake, listening to the sounds of Rowan moving restlessly in the living room. Something had changed with that phone call. Some fragile equilibrium had been disturbed. He could feel her pulling away already, rebuilding those walls he'd thought were finally coming down. In the morning, she was gone. Eli woke to silence, and he knew immediately that something was wrong. The apartment felt empty in a way it hadn't for 2 weeks, missing the subtle sounds of another person moving through the morning routine, the whisper of bare feet on linoleum, the gentle clink of dishes, the soft humming that had become Rowan's morning soundtrack. He found the sofa bed neatly made, her few possessions gone, except for a single item on the coffee table, a small wooden bird, carved with exquisite detail from what looked like a piece of driftwood. Beside it was a note written in careful handwriting. For Maisie, thank you for reminding me what home feels like. R. Where's Rowan? Maisie asked when she stumbled into the kitchen, her hair a tangle of sleep, mussed curls. Eli held up the note, not trusting his voice to remain steady. Maisie read it slowly, her face crumpling with each word. She left, but she promised we'd watch for shooting stars tonight. I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Did we do something wrong? The question broke Eli's heart. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated reasons for the things they do. But I thought she was happy here. She seemed happy. I thought so too. Maisie picked up the carved bird, running her small fingers over its smooth surface. She made this for me? It looks that way. It's beautiful. Tears were sliding down Maisie's cheeks now, but I don't want a present. I want her to come back. Eli gathered his daughter into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. He'd known this was a possibility hell. He'd expected it from the beginning. Rowan had never made any promises, never claimed she was staying permanently, but somewhere in the past 2 weeks he'd started to hope. They both had. Maybe she'll come back, Maisie whispered against his chest. Maybe, Eli said, though he didn't believe it. The finality of that note suggested Rowan was gone for good. The day felt endless. Eli took Maisie to the park, as promised, but she was listless and sad, clutching the wooden bird and occasionally trying her whistle without enthusiasm. The birds that came seemed to sense her mood. They perched nearby but wouldn't approach, as if they understood that the magic of the previous day had been broken. That evening, as they sat on the apartment's small balcony wrapped in blankets and scanning the sky for meteors, Maisie was unusually quiet. There's one, Eli said, pointing to a streak of light across the darkness. Rowan would have known what constellation it came from, Maisie said sadly. She might have. Eli pulled his daughter closer. But we can still enjoy it, just the two of us. It's not the same. She was right, of course. Nothing felt the same anymore. The apartment, which had felt warm and alive for 2 weeks, now seemed hollow and too quiet. Even the familiar routines, making dinner, helping with homework, bedtime stories, felt mechanical and empty. At work on Monday, Tommy noticed his mood immediately. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Thanks for the pep talk. What happened? Things seem to be going well with your house guest. She left. Ah. Tommy poured himself coffee and settled at the break room table. Want to talk about it? Not much to say. She was never planning to stay permanently. I guess I started hoping she might. How's Maisie taking it? About as well as you'd expect. She's been carrying around that bird carving Rowan made for her, asking when she's coming back. Tommy studied Eli's face. And what did you tell her? The truth. That I don't know. But you'd like her to come back. It wasn't a question, and Eli didn't treat it like one. Yeah, I would. Then maybe you should do something about it. Like what? I don't even know her last name, Tommy. I don't know where she came from or where she went. For all I know, she could be halfway across the country by now. Could start by asking around town. Cedar Falls isn't that big. Someone might have seen her. The idea had occurred to Eli, but something held him back. Rowan had left of her own free will. Who was he to chase after her, to try to convince her to return to a life she'd chosen to leave? But that evening, as he watched Maisie push food around her plate without eating, he reconsidered. His daughter had lost enough already. If there was even a chance of bringing some joy back into her life, didn't he owe it to her to try? After Maisie went to bed, Eli found himself studying the carved bird Rowan had left behind. The workmanship was extraordinary, not the rough whittling of an amateur, but the precise, confident work of someone with years of experience. The bird seemed to be in flight, its wings spread wide, every feather individually defined. On its base, carved in tiny letters, was a single word: hope. The next morning, he stopped by Chen's market on his way to work. "Mrs. Chen, have you seen that woman who was staying with us, Rowan?" Mrs. Chen looked up from arranging produce. "The one who helped Maisie with her homework." "No, I haven't seen her since last week. She seemed like a nice lady." "She was. She left Sunday morning, and Maisie's pretty upset about it. Children get attached quickly. It's their nature. Did she ever mention to you where she might go? Any family or friends in the area?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. She was very private, polite, but not one to share personal information. Eli tried the diner next, then the gas station, the library, even the post office. No one had seen Rowan since Saturday. It was as if she'd simply vanished. By Wednesday, he was starting to give up hope. Rowan was gone, and perhaps it was better that way. They'd gotten attached too quickly, built expectations that were never realistic. It was better to accept reality and move on. Then Sheriff Morrison stopped by the mill during Eli's lunch break. "Eli, you got a minute?" Dave Morrison had been sheriff of Cedar Falls for 15 years, a steady man in his 50s who handled the town's modest crime rate with a combination of common sense and genuine care for the community. Eli had known him casually for years, the way everyone knew everyone in a small town. "Sure, Dave, what's up?" "I wanted to ask you about a woman who's been staying with you. Goes by Rowan." Eli felt his stomach drop. "She's not staying with me anymore. She left on Sunday." "Why? Is she in some kind of trouble?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Got a call from someone asking questions about her. Someone who seemed to know she was in town." "What kind of questions?" "Where she was staying, how long she'd been here, whether she'd been seen with any children." Morrison's expression was grave. The caller claimed to be her brother, said he was worried about her mental state. "Her brother?" "That's what he said. But something about the call didn't sit right with me. Too many specific questions, like he already knew more than he was letting on." Eli's mind was racing. Rowan had said she had no family, no one looking for her. But then there was that phone call Saturday night, the one that had changed everything. "Dave, I need to find her." "Any particular reason why?" "Because she's been staying with my daughter and me for 2 weeks, and in that time she's been nothing but kind and helpful. Because my 8-year-old is heartbroken that she's gone. And because if someone's looking for her in a way that makes you uncomfortable, she might need help." Morrison studied Eli's face for a long moment. "You got any idea where she might have gone?" "None, but I have to try to find her." "All right, if you do find her, you call me. And Eli, be careful. I don't know what this woman's story is, but she's got someone looking for her who doesn't feel like family to me." That evening, Eli sat Maisie down for a serious conversation. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Did Rowan ever mention any family to you? Any place she might go if she left here?" Maisie shook her head. She said she didn't have family. That's why she was sad sometimes. "Did she ever talk about her past? About where she lived before?" "Not really, but..." Maisie bit her lip, thinking. She knew a lot about mountains, and she said once that she missed the ocean. Maybe she went to find the ocean. It wasn't much, but it was something. The nearest ocean was hundreds of miles away, but maybe she'd headed west, toward the coast. "Daddy, are we going to look for her?" "I'm going to try, sweetheart. But I need you to understand that she might not want to be found. People leave for all kinds of reasons, and we have to respect that. But what if she's in trouble? What if she needs help? It was the same question Eli had been asking himself. What if Rowan hadn't left because she wanted to, but because she felt she had to? What if that phone call had been some kind of threat? Then we'll help her if we can, he said, but first we have to find her. Over the next few days, Eli called every motel, hotel, and boarding house within a 100-mile radius. He posted on social media forums for missing persons, though he realized he didn't even have a photo of Rowan to share. He drove the mountain roads on weekends, stopping at truck stops and diners, showing the carved bird to waitresses and clerks, asking if anyone had seen the woman who might have made it. Nothing. A week and a half after Rowan's disappearance, Eli was beginning to accept that she was truly gone. He came home from another fruitless search to find Maisie sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in front of her, tears dripping onto her math worksheet. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I can't remember how Rowan taught me to do fractions," she said. "I keep trying, but I can't remember, and now I'm going to fail my test tomorrow." Eli looked at the worksheet, a dozen problems that would have been simple when Rowan was there to guide them through the logic. Now they seemed impossibly complex. "We'll figure it out together," he said, sitting beside his daughter. "Rowan showed you once, right? Try to remember what she said." For the next hour, they struggled through the problems, both of them frustrated and missing the gentle patience that Rowan had brought to these evening homework sessions. By the time they finished, Maisie was exhausted, and Eli felt like he'd run a marathon. That night, as he tucked Maisie into bed, she looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8 years. "She's not coming back, is she?" Eli wanted to lie, to offer false comfort, but he'd learned that children deserved honesty, even when it hurt. "I don't think so, sweetheart." Maisie nodded sadly and clutched the wooden bird to her chest. "I miss her." "I miss her too. Will we ever see her again?" "I don't know, but I want you to remember something, okay? Sometimes people come into our lives for just a little while, but they leave us better than we were before. Rowan did that for us. She reminded us how to be happy, how to find joy in small things. That's a gift we get to keep, even if she's not here anymore. Do you think she's happy wherever she is?" It was a question Eli couldn't answer, because he suspected the answer was no. Wherever Rowan was, whatever she was running from, he doubted she'd found peace. "I hope so," he said finally. "I really hope so." But as he turned off the light and headed toward his own room, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that Rowan was out there somewhere, alone and afraid, carrying burdens that no one should have to bear alone. And despite everything, despite the pain her leaving had caused, despite the questions she'd left unanswered, he knew that if she ever needed help, if she ever came back, he would welcome her with open arms. 2 weeks after Rowan's departure, life in the Jameson household had settled into a routine that felt like a pale shadow of what it had been. Eli went through the motions: work, school pickup, dinner, homework, bedtime, but everything felt muted, as if someone had turned down the volume on their lives. It was while cleaning out the living room on a Saturday morning that Maisie made the discovery that would change everything. "Daddy, what's this?" Eli looked up from folding the sofa bed to see his daughter kneeling beside the coffee table, holding a small wooden box he'd never seen before. It was about the size of a jewelry box, made from what looked like the same pale wood as the bird Rowan had carved. "I don't know, sweetheart. Where did you find it?" "It was under the couch cushions, way in the back where you can't see it." Eli took the box from her, noting the smooth finish and the delicate brass hinges. On the lid, carved in the same precise style as the bird, was a simple design: 2 intertwined hearts with a single flower between them. "Should we open it?" Maisie asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Eli hesitated. This was clearly something personal, something Rowan had either hidden or forgotten. Opening it felt like an invasion of privacy. But she was gone, and if there was any chance the box contained information about where she'd gone or how to contact her, didn't he owe it to Maisie to look? "I guess we should," he said finally. The box opened on well-oiled hinges, revealing a treasure trove of memories. On top was a stack of photographs, their edges worn from handling. Eli picked up the first one and felt his breath catch. It showed a woman who was unmistakably Rowan, but a younger, happier version. Her hair was shorter and darker, her face unlined by whatever sorrows had marked her since. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her eyes bright with joy. But it was the child in her arms that made Eli's heart stop. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, with Rowan's dark hair and bright smile. She was wearing a yellow sundress and had her arms wrapped around Rowan's neck, both of them caught in a moment of pure happiness. "Who is that?" Maisie asked, peering over his shoulder. "I think it's Rowan and her daughter. But she told me she didn't have children." Eli looked at the date stamped on the back of the photograph. 3 years ago. He flipped through the other pictures, Rowan and the little girl at a beach, building sand castles, at a playground, the child hanging upside down from monkey bars, while Rowan spotted her. In what looked like a garden, both of them covered in dirt and grinning. At the bottom of the stack was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline made Eli's stomach clench. "Local child dies in tragic accident." He read the brief article with growing understanding and heartbreak. Emma Blackwood, age 5, had died in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway. The driver, identified as the child's mother, Dr. Miranda Blackwood, had been hospitalized with serious injuries. Dr. Miranda Blackwood. Rowan. "Daddy, what does it say?" Eli folded the clipping carefully, his mind reeling. "It's just an old article, sweetheart. Nothing important." But it was everything. It explained the grief he'd seen in Rowan's eyes, the way she'd flinched when Maisie asked about children, the weight of sorrow she carried. She'd had a daughter, and she'd lost her. Not only lost her, but been driving when it happened. Beneath the photographs was a collection of other items, a small hair ribbon, bright yellow like the dress in the photograph. A child's drawing of a house with 2 stick figures labeled "Mommy and Me," a pressed flower daisy between 2 pieces of tissue paper. And at the very bottom, a folded piece of paper that looked like a letter. Eli unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was written in a child's careful handwriting. "Dear Mommy, thank you for taking me to the beach today. I loved finding shells with you and building the castle. You are the best mommy in the whole world. I love you more than all the stars. Love, Emma. P.S. Can we go again tomorrow?" Eli's eyes burned as he read the innocent words. This was what Rowan carried with her, not just the memory of her daughter, but the crushing weight of responsibility for her death. "Daddy, why are you crying?" He hadn't realized tears were falling. "Because this is very sad, sweetheart. Rowan lost her little girl, just like we lost Mommy." Maisie was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Is that why she was so sad sometimes, even when she was smiling? "I think so." "And is that why she left? Because we reminded her of what she lost?" The question was so perceptive, so heartbreakingly mature, that Eli had to take a moment to compose himself. "Maybe. Sometimes when we're hurting, being around happy families can make the hurt worse. But we weren't happy before she came. We were sad too." "That's true. So maybe we could have been sad together, and then happy together." Out of the mouths of babes, Eli pulled his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom. "Maybe you're right, sweetheart. Daddy, can we find her? Can we tell her that we understand about losing people you love?" It was the question Eli had been avoiding for 2 weeks. Could they find her? And more importantly, should they? Rowan had left for a reason. She'd made the decision that her presence in their lives wasn't healthy, wasn't sustainable. Who was he to second-guess that? But looking at the contents of the wooden box, the photos of a woman who had clearly been a loving mother, the precious mementos of a child who had been the center of someone's world, Eli felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about his own loneliness or even Maisie's attachment to Rowan. This was about a woman who was suffering alone, who had been carrying an unbearable burden without anyone to share the weight. "We can try," he said finally, "but first I need to make some phone calls." That afternoon, while Maisie was at a sleepover with her friend Emma, Eli sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and the newspaper clipping, piecing together the story of Dr. Miranda Rowan Blackwood. What he found broke his heart. Miranda had been a pediatric surgeon at Denver Children's Hospital, highly respected and beloved by her colleagues. She'd been a single mother, raising Emma alone after the child's father had left when he learned about the pregnancy. By all accounts, she'd been devoted to her daughter, arranging her demanding schedule around school events and bedtime stories. The accident had happened on a Friday evening in October, 2 years ago. Miranda had been driving home from Emma's dance recital when a drunk driver ran a red light, slamming into the passenger side of their car. Emma had died instantly. Miranda had spent 3 weeks in intensive care, and when she'd finally recovered enough to learn what had happened, she'd suffered a complete breakdown. The articles that followed painted a picture of a woman consumed by guilt and grief. She'd taken leave from the hospital, then resigned entirely. There were mentions of depression, of substance abuse, of a once brilliant surgeon who could no longer function in the world she'd once navigated with confidence. The last article Eli could find was dated 8 months ago. Former surgeon's medical license suspended following disciplinary hearing. It was brief, clinical, mentioning only that Dr. Miranda Blackwood's license had been suspended, pending treatment for substance abuse and mental health issues. 8 months ago. That was when she'd begun her life as Rowan, the homeless woman who drifted from town to town, carrying nothing but a backpack and the weight of unbearable loss. Eli closed the laptop and stared out the window at the mountains beyond Cedar Falls. Somewhere out there was a woman who had lost everything: her child, her career, her identity, her sense of self-worth. She was alone, probably cold and hungry, convinced that she deserved nothing better. He thought about Sarah, about those dark days after her death when he'd questioned everything: his faith, his purpose, his ability to be the father Maisie needed. He'd been lucky. He'd had his daughter to ground him, a job that forced him to get up each morning, a community that had surrounded him with support. Miranda Blackwood had had none of that. She'd lost her child and then systematically lost everything else until she was left with nothing but guilt and the open road. His phone rang, jarring him from his thoughts. Sheriff Morrison's name appeared on the display. "Dave, what's up?" "Eli, I've got some news about your friend Rowan. Real name's Miranda Blackwood, and she's got quite a story." "I know. I just spent the afternoon researching her online." "Then you know she's not just some random homeless woman. She's a doctor of Wasand. She's dealing with some serious trauma." "Dave, we need to find her." "Agreed, but there's something else you should know. That man who called asking about her, I did some digging, and I don't think he's her brother. In fact, I'm not sure he's family at all." Eli felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean he knew too much about her movements, asked too many specific questions about her mental state and her interactions with children. That doesn't sound like a concerned family member to me. That sounds like someone with an agenda." "What kind of agenda?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. But Eli, if she's out there alone and someone's tracking her, she could be in real danger." The conversation ended with Morrison promising to put out feelers through law enforcement channels while Eli continued searching locally. But as he hung up the phone, Eli realized that finding Miranda Rowan had become about more than bringing joy back to his daughter's life or even offering comfort to a grieving woman. It had become about saving her. That evening, he sat on the couch with the wooden box in his lap, studying the photograph of Rowan and Emma. In it, Rowan looked like a woman who believed in the future, who saw endless possibilities in every day. The woman who had stayed in his home had been a ghost of that person, going through the motions of living but not really alive. Yet for 2 weeks she'd found something that had brought her back to herself, even temporarily. She'd laughed with Maisie, shared meals with them, carved whistles and pressed flowers, and made their house feel like a home again. She'd been healing, slowly but surely, until that phone call had shattered whatever fragile peace she'd found. Eli looked at the child's letter again, at Emma's innocent declaration of love and trust. "You are the best mommy in the whole world." Miranda Blackwood had been a good mother, The evidence was right there, in the box, the carefully pressed flower, the saved drawings, the dozens of photos, capturing moments of pure joy between mother and daughter. She'd loved Emma completely, and Emma had loved her back, with the uncomplicated devotion that only children can give. The accident hadn't changed that. Guilt might have convinced Miranda otherwise, but the truth remained. She had been a good mother who'd lost her child in a tragedy that could have happened to anyone. And maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be a mother again. Eli thought about Maisie's question. Can we tell her that we understand about losing people you love? His daughter had grasped something that adults often missed, that shared grief could be a bridge rather than a barrier, that understanding loss made people more capable of loving, not less. As he carefully returned the contents to the wooden box, Eli made a decision. He would find Miranda Blackwood, no matter how long it took or how far he had to travel. And when he did, he would tell her what her daughter had written, that she was the best mummy in the whole world. Because sometimes the people we think we're saving end up saving us instead. And sometimes second chances come disguised, as 8-year-old girls who see magic in carved birds and believe that everyone deserves to be loved. The break came 3 days later, from an unexpected source. Eli was at the mill, running the forklift through its morning routine, when his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Come to the market when you can. I have information about your friend." He finished his shift with agonizing slowness, his mind racing with possibilities. Had Mrs. Chen seen Rowan somewhere? Had someone else in town heard something? When he finally made it to Chen's market, the elderly woman was waiting for him with an expression of deep concern. "Eli, sit down," she said, gesturing to the small chair behind the counter that she kept for elderly customers who needed to rest while shopping. "Mrs. Chen, what is it? Have you seen her?" "Not seen, no, but I've heard things, troubling things." She moved to the front door and turned the sign to "Closed," despite the early hour. "A man came by yesterday asking questions, said he was her brother, looking for his sister Miranda." Eli's blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, because something felt wrong about him. He knew too much and too little at the same time, if you understand me. He knew she'd been staying with you, knew about Maisie, even knew she'd helped with homework. But when I asked him what his sister's favorite food was, what she liked to do for fun, he couldn't answer." "What did he look like?" "Tall, thin, expensive clothes, driving a black SUV with Colorado plates. He had the manner of someone used to getting what he wants." Mrs. Chen's weathered face was creased with worry. But there was something cold about his eyes, Eli. This was not a man looking for a beloved sister. Eli's mind was racing. If this man wasn't family, who was he? And what did he want with Miranda? "There's more," Mrs. Chen continued. "After he left, I called my nephew David, works at the hospital in Denver. I asked him to look into this Miranda Blackwood discreetly. And she was a pediatric surgeon, very well respected until 2 years ago, when her daughter died in a car accident. But here's what's interesting. David says there are rumors that the accident wasn't entirely what it appeared to be." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Chen leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "David heard from someone in the DA's office that they suspected the other driver, the one who was supposedly drunk, might have been deliberately targeting Miranda's car. But they could never prove it, and the man died in the crash, so the case was closed as a traffic accident." Eli felt the room spin around him. "Someone tried to kill her? It's just a rumor, but think about it. A respected surgeon, a single mother. Suddenly someone wants her dead badly enough to stage a car accident. What does that suggest to you? That she knew something, or had something worth killing for." "Exactly. And if someone tried once and failed, if they've been looking for her since, then she's been running for her life, not just from grief." Mrs. Chen nodded grimly. "David also told me something else. Miranda Blackwood wasn't just any pediatric surgeon. She worked with trauma cases, children who'd been abused or neglected. She testified in court cases, helped put bad people in prison. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity." Miranda hadn't just lost her daughter in a random accident. She'd been targeted by someone she'd helped prosecute, someone with enough resources and connections to stage a complex murder attempt. And now they'd tracked her to Cedar Falls. Mrs. Chen, I need to find her before he does. I was hoping you'd say that. She disappeared into the back room and returned with a small piece of paper. David did some more digging. Miranda's medical license was suspended, but before that happened, she'd been volunteering at free clinics. There's one about 60 miles west of here, near Riverside. It's run by a retired doctor named Harrison Webb. David thinks there's a chance she might have gone there. Eli took the paper with hands that weren't quite steady. Thank you for everything. Be careful, Eli. If I'm right about this man, he's dangerous. And if he's tracking her, following you might lead him right to her. I'll be careful. But as Eli left the market and walked to his truck, his mind was already racing ahead to what he would find in Riverside. Was Miranda there? Was she safe? And more importantly, did she know that the man hunting her had found her trail? The drive to Riverside took him through winding mountain roads that were treacherous even in good weather. It was late afternoon by the time he reached the small town, hardly more than a few blocks of buildings clustered around a main street that had seen better days. The free clinic wasn't hard to find. It occupied a converted house on the edge of town with a small wooden sign that read, Riverside Community Health Center. Eli parked across the street and studied the building, looking for any sign of the black SUV Mrs. Chen had described. The street was empty, except for a few older cars and a rusted pickup truck. No sign of surveillance or danger, but Eli's nerves were still on edge as he approached the clinic's front door. A bell chimed as he entered, and a young woman behind the reception desk looked up with a tired but friendly smile. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," Eli said carefully. "A woman named Miranda Blackwood. She might be volunteering here." The receptionist's expression immediately became guarded. "I'm sorry, I can't give out information about our volunteers or patients. Please, I'm not trying to cause trouble. She was staying with my family, and she left suddenly. I'm worried about her safety." "Sir, I really can't." "Is there a problem here?" A voice from behind made Eli turn. An elderly man in a white coat stood in the doorway to what looked like an examination room. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Dr. Webb," Eli guessed. "That's right. And you are?" "Eli Jameson. I'm looking for Miranda Blackwood." Dr. Webb's expression didn't change, but Eli caught something, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or concern. "Why don't you come into my office?" the doctor said. "Sarah, we'll be fine." The office was small and cluttered, with medical textbooks lining the walls and patient files stacked neatly on the desk. Dr. Webb closed the door and gestured for Eli to take a seat. "Now, Mr. Jameson, why are you looking for Miranda?" "Because I think she's in danger, and because my 8-year-old daughter is heartbroken that she's gone." For the next few minutes, Eli found himself telling the story of the past few weeks, Miranda's arrival, her time with his family, her sudden departure, and the mysterious man who'd been asking questions about her. Dr. Webb listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. "She's here," he said finally, "or rather she was. She left this morning." Eli's heart sank. "Did she say where she was going?" "No, but she was frightened. Terrified, actually. She said someone had found her, that it wasn't safe to stay in one place anymore." "Dr. Webb, do you know why someone would want to hurt her?" The older man was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed and opened a desk drawer, pulling out a manila folder. "Miranda came to me 6 months ago," he said. "She was in bad shape, malnourished, suffering from depression and PTSD, barely functional. But underneath all that trauma, I could see the brilliant surgeon she'd once been." "What happened to her?" "What happened was that she tried to save a child's life, and it cost her everything." Dr. Webb opened the folder and pulled out a newspaper clipping. "Do you remember the Castellanos case from 3 years ago?" Eli shook his head. Vincent Castellanos was a wealthy businessman with connections to organized crime. He was also a monster who abused his 7-year-old son so severely that the child required multiple surgeries. Miranda was the surgeon who saved that boy's life, and when the case went to trial, she testified about the extent of the abuse. And Castellanos went to prison? He was supposed to, but on the day of sentencing, he died of an apparent heart attack in his cell. Very convenient and very suspicious, but impossible to prove otherwise. Eli was beginning to understand. But if Castellanos was dead, why would anyone want to hurt Miranda? Because Vincent Castellanos had 3 brothers, all of them involved in the family business, and they blamed Miranda for destroying their brother's reputation and costing them millions in seized assets. The room felt cold, despite the heater running in the corner. So they tried to kill her. They hired someone to make it look like an accident, a drunk driver, a collision at just the right angle to kill her but make it seem random. They didn't count on her daughter being in the car. Emma, a beautiful little girl who died because her mother had the courage to stand up for an abused child. Webb's voice was heavy with grief. Miranda has been living with that guilt for 2 years, convinced that her daughter's death was her fault. But it wasn't. She was doing her job, protecting a child. You and I know that. Miranda, she's had a harder time accepting it. Eli thought about the wooden box, about the photographs of a laughing mother and daughter, about the weight of grief and guilt that Miranda had been carrying. Dr. Webb, the man who's been asking about Herdu, you think he's working for the Castellanos family? I'm almost certain of it. Miranda thought she was safe, that they'd given up looking for her, but apparently not. Where would she go? She can't keep running forever. I don't know. But Mr. Jameson, if you care about this woman, you need to understand something. The people hunting her don't just want to kill her, they want to make her suffer first. They blame her for everything that happened to their family, and they won't stop until they have their revenge. Eli stood up, his mind made up. I have to find her. That might not be wise. These are dangerous people and... Dr. Webb, she spent 2 weeks in my home. She helped my daughter with homework and taught her to carve whistles and made our house feel like a home again. She's not just some stranger, she's family now, and you don't abandon family. The doctor studied Eli's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but if you're going to do this, you're going to need help and information. He reached into the folder again and pulled out what looked like a driver's license photo. It showed a man in his 40s with dark hair and cold eyes, the same description Mrs. Chen had given of Miranda's supposed brother. This is Marco Castellanos, Vincent's youngest brother. He's the one who's been tracking her. FBI has a file on him thick as a phone book, but he's never been convicted of anything. Smart, ruthless, and patient. How do you know all this? Because Miranda told me. She's been living in terror for 2 years, looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows. When she came here, she thought she might finally be safe. But yesterday, someone called asking about her, someone who knew she was here. Eli felt his blood turn to ice. He found the clinic? It appears so, which means he's probably tracking her movements somehow. Phone records, credit card usage, medical databases. There are a dozen ways to find someone if you have the right resources and connections. Then she's not safe anywhere. Not alone, no. But Mr. Jameson, there is one place she might go, somewhere she thinks of as sacred ground. Where? Dr. Webb pulled out a final piece of paper, a photocopied map, with a location circled in red ink. Emma's grave. It's in a cemetery outside Denver, about 4 hours from here. Miranda goes there every year on the anniversary of the accident, which is next week. If she's planning to run again, she might go there first to say goodbye. Eli took the map with hands that were surprisingly steady, considering the magnitude of what he was contemplating. He was about to drive into a situation that could get him killed, chasing after a woman who might not want to be found, to warn her about a danger she might already know about. But as he looked at the address of the cemetery, he thought about Maisie asking when Rowan was coming home. He thought about the wooden bird sitting on their coffee table, carved with love by hands that had once saved children's lives. He thought about the photographs in the box about a mother and daughter who had loved each other completely until violence tore them apart. Dr. Webb, if something happens to me, if I don't come back, can you call Sheriff Morrison in Cedar Falls? Tell him what you told me about the Castellanos family. Mr. Jameson, please reconsider. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. The moment she became part of my family, it became my fight. As Eli left the clinic and walked back to his truck, he realized that everything had changed. Miranda wasn't just a homeless woman with a tragic past. She was a hero who had paid a terrible price for doing the right thing. She was a mother who had lost everything because she'd tried to save a child. And somewhere out there, Marco Castellanos was hunting her with the patience and resources of a man who had nothing left to lose. But he wasn't the only one, because Eli Jameson was about to do something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He was going to save the woman who had already saved his family. The drive back to Cedar Falls was a blur of mountain curves and racing thoughts. Eli's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white, and his mind kept returning to Dr. Webb's warning, "These are dangerous people." But every time doubt crept in, he thought about Maisie's letter to Santa Claus, the one he'd found tucked under her pillow 3 nights ago when he was putting away laundry. "Dear Santa," it had read in her careful, second-grade handwriting. "I know it's not Christmas yet, but I wanted to ask you something important. Can you please bring Rowan back? Not as a present for me, but because I think she needs us. Daddy says sometimes people who are lost need help finding their way home, and I think Rowan is very lost. She made our house happy, and I want to make her happy too. I don't need any toys this year, if you can just help her not be sad anymore. Love, Maisie, P.S. Tell her the birds still come when I use the whistle she made me." That letter had been the final straw, the thing that made Eli realize this wasn't about his own loneliness or even his growing feelings for Miranda. This was about a child who understood, with the simple clarity that adults often lost, that love meant taking care of the people who mattered to you. As he pulled into his apartment complex, Eli's phone rang. Sheriff Morrison's name appeared on the display. "Dave." "Eli, where are you?" "Just got home." "Why?" "Because I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. That man who was asking about Miranda Blackwood. He's back in town, and this time he's not being subtle about it." Eli felt his blood turn to ice. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he went to Maisie's school asking questions, claimed to be a family friend trying to get in touch with Miranda. The principal called me because something felt off." "Jesus. Is Maisie okay?" "She's fine. I had them keep her inside during recess and called Mrs. Chen to pick her up early. She's at the market now. But Eli, this guy is escalating. Whatever he wants with Miranda, he's getting desperate." Eli closed his eyes, trying to think clearly, despite the panic threatening to overwhelm him. "Dave, I know who he is, and I know where Miranda probably is. Then we need to talk. Now." 20 minutes later, Eli sat in Sheriff Morrison's small office, laying out everything he'd learned from Dr. Webb. Morrison listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "The Castellanos family," Morrison said when Eli finished. "I've heard of them. FBI's been trying to build a case for years, but they're smart-use intermediaries, keep their hands clean. But they're not going to stop looking for her." "No, they're not. And Eli, if this Marco Castellanos is willing to approach a school asking about Miranda, it means he's running out of patience. Men like that don't make themselves visible unless they're planning something immediate." Eli pulled out the map Dr. Webb had given him. "She's probably going to her daughter's grave. It's the anniversary of the accident next week." Morrison studied the map, then looked up at Eli with concern. "You're thinking of going after her?" "I have to." "No, you don't. This is a job for law enforcement now. I can contact the Denver police, have them check the cemetery." "And tell them what?" "That a woman who's been running for 2 years might show up at her daughter's grave. Dave, she'll see the police cars and disappear again, but she might trust me. Or Marco Castellanos might be waiting there too, and you'll walk right into a trap." It was a possibility Eli had considered during the drive home. But something Dr. Webb had said stuck with him. They don't just want to kill her, they want to make her suffer first. If the Castellanos family wanted revenge, they'd want Miranda to know why she was dying. They'd want to confront her, to make her pay for what they saw as her crimes against their family. Dave, what if we use that? What if we set our own trap? Morrison raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Marco Castellanos wants Miranda, but he also wants her to suffer. He's not going to take a sniper shot from a distance. He's going to want to get close, to talk to her, to make sure she knows why she's dying. So we give him what he wants, but on our terms. I go to the cemetery, find Miranda, and convince her to help us end this. We call in the FBI, set up surveillance, and use her as bait to draw him out. Morrison was already shaking his head. Eli, that's insane. You're talking about using a traumatized woman as bait for a professional killer. I'm talking about giving her a chance to stop running. Dave, she's been living like a ghost for 2 years, moving from town to town, afraid to use her real name or form any attachments. That's not living, that's just surviving, and sooner or later, Marco Castellanos is going to catch up with her anyway. What if she doesn't want to do it? What if she'd rather keep running? Eli thought about the wooden box, about the photographs of a woman who had once believed in justice strongly enough to testify against a monster. That woman was still in there, buried under layers of grief and guilt, but not gone. Then that's her choice, but I have to at least give her the option. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Eli's face. You're in love with her. It wasn't a question, and Eli didn't treat it like one. Maybe, probably, but that's not why I'm doing this. Then why? Because she saved my family when she didn't have to. Because she brought joy back into my daughter's life. Because everyone deserves a chance to stop running and start living again. Morrison sighed and pulled out his phone. All right, but we do this right. I'm calling the FBI, and I'm calling Denver PD. If you're going to walk into a situation with Marco Castellanos, you're going to have backup. And if the cavalry spooks him and he disappears again, then at least you'll be alive to try another approach. While Morrison made his calls, Eli drove to Chen's Market to pick up Maisie. He found her in the back room, working on homework at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table, but her heart clearly wasn't in it. "Daddy!" She launched herself into his arms with unusual intensity. "Mrs. Chen said a bad man was asking about Rowan at my school. It's okay, sweetheart. The sheriff is handling it. But what if he hurts her?" The question cut straight to Eli's heart, because it was the same fear that had been driving him all day. "I'm not going to let that happen." "How do you know?" "Because I'm going to find her and make sure she's safe." Maisie pulled back to look at him, her 8-year-old eyes suddenly serious. "You're going to leave, aren't you? To look for her?" Eli had never been able to lie to his daughter, and he wasn't going to start now. "Yes, but only for a day or two, and Mrs. Chen is going to stay with you." "What if you don't come back?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "Sweetheart, Mommy didn't come back. What if you don't either?" Eli knelt down so he was at eye level with his daughter, taking her small hands in his larger ones. "Maisie, I promise you, I will come back, and hopefully I'll bring Rowan with me." "Do you really think you can find her?" "I'm going to try, but honey, I need you to understand something. Rowan is in trouble, and the only way to help her is for me to go where she is. It might be dangerous." "Then why are you going?" "Because sometimes when someone you care about is in trouble, you have to take risks to help them, because that's what family does for each other." "And Rowan is family now?" "If she wants to be." Maisie was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out the wooden bird Rowan had carved for her. "Give her this," she said, pressing it into Eli's hands. "Tell her I finished my cloud project and got an A+. Tell her the birds still come when I use my whistle. And tell her," she paused, thinking carefully, "tell her that I know about her little girl, and I'm sorry she's so sad, but that doesn't mean she can't be happy again." Eli's eyes burned as he took the carving. "How did you know about her daughter?" "I saw the pictures in the box. The little girl looked like she loved her mummy very much." "She did? And Rowan loved her back?" "Yes." "Then she knows how to be a good mummy, and maybe she could practice with me until her heart doesn't hurt so much anymore. Out of the mouths of babes. Eli pulled his daughter close, marveling once again at her wisdom and compassion. "I'll tell her," he whispered. "I'll tell her everything." That evening, after he'd explained the situation to Mrs. Chen and made arrangements for Maisie's care, Eli sat at his kitchen table making final preparations. He'd packed a small bag with clothes for 2 days, printed out maps and directions to the cemetery, and charged his phone. Sheriff Morrison had briefed him on the FBI's plan. They would have agents positioned around the cemetery, ready to move if Marco Castellanos showed up. But as Eli held the wooden bird Maisie had given him, he realized that success wouldn't be measured by whether they caught Marco Castellanos. It would be measured by whether he could convince Miranda that she was worth saving, that her life had value beyond the guilt and grief she'd been carrying. His phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. "FBI team is in position. Denver PD has unmarked cars ready. You sure about this?" Eli typed back, "As sure as I can be. Remember, if you see any sign of Castellanos, you call for backup immediately. Don't try to be a hero." "Understood." But as Eli turned off the lights and headed toward his bedroom to try to get some sleep before the drive to Denver, he knew that heroism wasn't really about being brave or taking risks. Sometimes it was just about showing up when someone needed you, about refusing to let the people you cared about face their demons alone. Tomorrow, he would drive to a cemetery outside Denver and try to find a woman who had been running from her past for 2 years. He would try to convince her that she didn't have to run anymore, that there were people who cared about her enough to stand with her against whatever came next. And if Marco Castellanos was waiting there too, well, then Eli would deal with that when it happened. Because sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons or strategy. Sometimes they were fought with nothing more than love and the stubborn refusal to give up on the people who mattered. In her bedroom across town, Maisie lay awake, staring at the ceiling, clutching the whistle Rowan had carved for her. She'd tried using it earlier, calling softly out her bedroom window, but no birds had come. Maybe they knew, somehow, that the person who had taught her how to use it was far away and in trouble. "Please, bring them home safe," she whispered to whatever force in the universe might be listening, both of them. And in the darkness, with only the sound of wind through the trees as an answer, Maisie closed her eyes and held on to hope with the fierce determination that only children possess the belief that love was stronger than fear, that families were worth fighting for, and that sometimes, if you wished hard enough, lost people could find their way home. The Denver Cemetery was a sprawling expanse of weathered headstones and ancient oak trees, their branches bare against the grey October sky. Eli parked his truck near the main entrance, noting the unmarked FBI surveillance van positioned across the street and the casual-looking jogger, who was clearly a plainclothes officer, making his 3rd lap around the perimeter. The compass his father had given him years ago sat heavy in his jacket pocket, a gift for his 18th birthday, with the inscription, "For finding your way when the path isn't clear." Eli had carried it through his wedding day, through Sarah's funeral, through every major decision that had shaped his life. Now, as he walked through the cemetery gates, it felt like a talisman against the uncertainty ahead. According to the cemetery records Sheriff Morrison had obtained, Emma Blackwood was buried in Section C, near a small pond that attracted ducks and geese. Eli followed the winding path, checking plot numbers and trying to look like any other visitor paying respects to a loved one. He found Miranda before he found the grave. She was sitting on a small stone bench about 50 yards from where Emma was buried, staring across the pond with an expression of such profound sadness that it made Eli's chest ache. She looked thinner than she had in Cedar Falls, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, and her hair was shorter, roughly cut, as if she'd done it herself, with whatever tools were available. But she was alive, and she was here, and for the first time in days, Eli allowed himself to hope. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he was about 10 feet away, she spoke without turning around. "I wondered if you'd find me." "Miranda. Is that my name now? I'd almost forgotten." She turned to look at him, and he saw that her face was streaked with tears. "How did you know I'd be here?" "Dr. Webb told me. He's worried about you." "Dr. Webb talks too much," but there was no anger in her voice, only resignation. "You shouldn't have come, Eli. It's not safe. I know about Marco Castellanos. I know about the accident, about Emma, about why you've been running." Miranda's face went very pale. "Then you know why you need to leave. Now. I'm not leaving without you." "Eli." "No, listen to me. I found your box, the one you left behind. I saw the pictures of you and Emma, read her letter. I know who you really are, Miranda. You're not the broken woman you think you are. You're a mother who loved her daughter completely and a doctor who risked everything to save a child from abuse. And because of that, Emma is dead." Miranda's voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't you understand? She died because of my choices, because I couldn't leave well enough alone. She died because a monster decided that silencing you was more important than an innocent child's life. That's not on you, Miranda. That's on Vincent Castellanos and his family. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Talk to me." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound, the gentle lapping of water against the pond's edge. Finally, Miranda spoke. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning and remember, all over again, that your child is gone? To reach for the phone to call her, to set 2 places at the table, to hear her voice in another room before you remember it's impossible. No, but I know what it's like to lose someone you love. When Sarah died, I thought the grief would kill me. Some days, I almost hoped it would. But you had Maisie, something to live for. And you have something to live for too. You just can't see it yet." Miranda laughed bitterly. "What could I possibly have to live for? My career is over, my daughter is dead, and I've spent 2 years living like an animal, hiding in shadows and jumping at every unexpected sound." Eli reached into his jacket and pulled out the wooden bird Maisie had given him. "You have this." Miranda stared at the carving, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "Maisie's bird. She wanted me to give it back to you. She said to tell you she got an A+ on her cloud project, that the birds still come when she uses her whistle, and that she knows about Emma." "She knows." Miranda's voice was sharp with panic. "She found your box, saw the pictures, but Miranda, she didn't see a woman who failed her daughter. She saw a mother who loved completely, who made memories worth treasuring. She wanted me to tell you something else too." "What?" "That just because your heart hurts doesn't mean you can't be happy again, and that maybe you could practice being a mother with her until the pain isn't so sharp." Miranda broke down then, sobbing with the kind of grief that came from the deepest places of the heart. Eli moved to sit beside her on the bench, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "I can't," she whispered between sobs. "I can't be what she needs. What you need, I'm too broken." "So were we, before you came along." Maisie barely spoke above a whisper for 6 months after Sarah died. "I was going through the motions of living but not really alive. And then you showed up in our lives and reminded us what joy looked like. That was different. That was just. That was love, Miranda. The kind of love that sees past broken places to the person underneath. The kind of love Emma had for you, and you had for her." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo he'd taken the week before she left Maisie at the kitchen table, laughing at something Miranda had said while they worked on homework together. "Look at her face," he said softly. "When's the last time you saw a child look that purely happy?" Miranda stared at the photo, her tears falling freely. "She's beautiful." "She is, and she misses you terribly. We both do." "Eli, you don't understand what you're asking. Marco Castellanos has been hunting me for 2 years. He's not going to stop just because I'm happy now. Being with you and Maisie will only put you in danger." "Then let's end it. The FBI is here, Miranda. They're ready to help, to finally give you a chance to stop running." Miranda's head snapped up. "They're here, now?" "Positioned around the cemetery. Sheriff Morrison coordinated with them. If Marco shows up." "If he shows up, people are going to die." Miranda stood abruptly, scanning the trees and pathways around them. "Eli, you have to leave, now, before..." Before what? The voice came from behind them, smooth and cultured with just a hint of an accent. Eli turned to see a man in an expensive overcoat approaching them along the path, his hands visible but his posture suggesting coiled danger. "Dr. Miranda Blackwood," Marco Castellanos said, stopping about 20 feet away. "You've been a very difficult woman to find." Eli's blood turned to ice as he recognized the man from the photo Dr. Webb had shown him. Marco was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of refined appearance that spoke of wealth and education. But his eyes were cold, calculating, and fixed on Miranda with an intensity that made Eli's skin crawl. "Marco." Miranda's voice was steady, though Eli could see her hands trembling. "I wondered when you'd catch up with me." "Did you? I rather thought you'd convinced yourself you were safe, living with this man and his daughter like a normal person." Marco's gaze shifted to Eli with casual menace. "You must be the single father. Touching, really, how you've all played house together." "Leave him out of this," Miranda said, stepping slightly in front of Eli. "This is between you and me." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Doctor. You see, I've spent considerable resources tracking you down, and in the process, I've learned all about your new attachments. The little girl who calls you Rowan, the man who took you in like a stray cat. They've become part of the equation now." Eli felt his father's compass press against his ribs as he shifted, trying to position himself between Marco and Miranda. Where were the FBI agents? Surely they'd seen Marco approach by now. "What do you want?" Miranda asked. "Justice. You destroyed my family, Doctor. My brother died in disgrace. Our assets were seized, our reputation ruined. All because you couldn't mind your own business when it came to family matters." "Family matters?" Miranda's voice rose with anger. "You called torturing a 7-year-old child a family matter? I call it none of your concern. That boy was our blood, our responsibility. You had no right to interfere." "I had every right. I'm a doctor, was a doctor. It was my job to protect that child. And look how well that worked out for you." Marco's smile was cold and predatory. "Your self-righteousness cost you everything, didn't it? Your career, your reputation, your precious daughter." "Don't." The word came out as a growl, and Eli was startled by the fury in Miranda's voice. "Don't you dare talk about Emma." "Why not? She's the reason we're here, isn't she? Sweet little Emma, who died because Mommy couldn't keep her mouth shut in court." Eli saw Miranda flinch as if she'd been struck, and something snapped inside him. "That's enough." Marco turned his attention to Eli with mock surprise. "The boyfriend speaks. How charming. Tell me, do you know what your lady love did to earn my family's attention? Do you know the blood on her hands? I know she saved a child's life. She destroyed a family. She exposed monsters." Such harsh language. Marco reached into his coat, and Eli tensed, but the man only pulled out a photograph. "Do you know what this is?" Even from a distance, Eli could see it was a picture of him and Maisie, taken outside her school. His daughter was laughing at something he'd said, completely unaware that a predator had been watching them. "Beautiful little girl," Marco continued conversationally. 8 years old, I believe. About the same age as my nephew when the good doctor here decided to play savior. "If you touch her," Eli started forward, but Marco raised a hand. Now, Mr. Jameson, let's not be hasty. I'm simply illustrating a point. You see, Dr. Blackwood, I could have killed you months ago. A car accident, a mugging gone wrong, a homeless woman found dead in an alley who would have investigated. But that would have been too easy, too quick. Then what do you want? I want you to understand loss the way my family has understood loss. I want you to feel what it's like to have everything torn away from you because of someone else's choices." The implication hit Eli like a physical blow. "You're going to hurt Maisie. I'm going to give the good doctor here a choice. She can come with me now, quietly, and accept the consequences of her actions. Or she can force me to be creative in my methods of persuasion." Miranda's face had gone ashen. "Marco, please, I'll do whatever you want. Just leave them alone." "I know you will. But first I want to make sure you truly understand what you're agreeing to." He pulled out a phone and showed them the screen. It was a live video feed of what looked like Maisie's classroom, the camera positioned to show her desk clearly. Eli's heart stopped. How? I have associates, Mr. Jameson. People who can gain access to schools, homes, any place I need them to be. Your daughter is perfectly safe, for now. But if Dr. Staines... Blackwood doesn't come with me voluntarily. Well, children can be so unpredictable. Accidents happen. You bastard, Eli breathed. I'm a businessman, nothing more. And right now, I'm conducting a transaction. Dr. Blackwood's compliance in exchange for your daughter's continued well-being. Eli looked at Miranda and saw the exact moment she made her decision. Her shoulders straightened, and the fear in her eyes was replaced by a terrible resolve. All right, she said quietly. I'll come with you, but I want your word that nothing will happen to Eli or Maisie. You have it. Your word isn't worth anything. Then you'll have to trust that my desire for revenge is satisfied by your cooperation. Harm to innocent bystanders would be unnecessary. Eli grabbed Miranda's arm. No, you're not going with him. I have to. Miranda, look at me. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. You are not the same woman who's been running for 2 years. You're stronger now. You have people who care about you, who will fight for you. And that's exactly why I have to go, to protect you. We protect each other. That's what families do. For a moment, something flickered in Miranda's eyes, hope, maybe, or the memory of what it felt like to believe she was worth saving. Then Marco's voice cut through the moment. How touching, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Dr. Blackwood, if you would. Miranda took a step toward Marco, then stopped. She turned back to Eli and pressed something into his hand, the wooden bird Maisie had given her. Tell her I'm sorry, she whispered. Tell her she was right about second chances, but sometimes the past doesn't let you have them. Miranda, don't. But she was already walking toward Marco, her spine straight and her head held high. Despite everything, despite the fear and the grief and the 2 years of running, she was walking toward almost certain death to protect the people she loved. And in that moment, Eli understood what true courage looked like. He also understood that he wasn't going to let her face it alone. As Marco reached out to take Miranda's arm, Eli's hand closed around his father's compass. The inscription flashed through his mind. For finding your way when the path isn't clear. The path had never been clearer. Marco, he called out, his voice carrying across the cemetery grounds. The man turned, irritation flickering across his features. Mr. Jameson, I thought we had an understanding. We do, but I think you should know that you're surrounded. Marco's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? FBI. They've been watching this whole conversation, and right about now, they're moving into position. It was a bluff. Eli had no idea where the FBI agents were or what they were doing. But he saw doubt flicker across Marco's face, saw the man's gaze dart toward the tree line and pathways around them. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. See if your associate at the school is still responding. Marco pulled out his phone, and Eli saw his face change as he tried to reach his contact. The FBI must have moved faster than expected. It doesn't matter, Marco said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. I still have the girl. No, you don't. Sheriff Morrison picked her up an hour ago. She's safe. It was another bluff, but this time Eli hit the mark. Marco's face went white with rage. You stupid. Interfering. The shot came from the tree line, precise and clean. Marco spun around, clutching his shoulder. His weapon, when had he drawn a weapon, flying from his grasp to clatter on the stone path. FBI, nobody move. Agents emerged from behind headstones and trees, their weapons drawn and trained on Marco, who was now on his knees and bleeding from what looked like a deliberately non-fatal wound. Eli Jameson, step away from the suspect, one of the agents called out. But Eli wasn't looking at Marco anymore. He was looking at Miranda, who had fallen to her knees beside the pond, her whole body shaking with sobs of relief and exhaustion. He went to her, ignoring the shouted commands from the FBI agents, and gathered her into his arms. It's over, He whispered against her hair. "It's finally over. Mazius, she really safe?" "She's safe. Morrison has her at the station, probably spoiling her with hot chocolate and letting her play with the radio." Miranda clung to him like a drowning woman clinging to a life raft. "I can't believe it's over. I can't believe he's really caught." "Believe it. And Miranda, you don't have to run anymore." As the FBI agents secured Marco Castellanos and called for medical assistance, as the cemetery filled with the controlled chaos of a law enforcement operation, Eli held the woman he loved and felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. The absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. His father's compass had been right. When the path wasn't clear, sometimes you just had to trust your heart to find the way home. The FBI debriefing took 4 hours. Eli sat in a sterile conference room at the Denver field office, drinking bad coffee and answering the same questions over and over again. How long had he known Miranda? When had he learned her real identity? Had Marco Castellanos made any specific threats against his daughter? Agent Sarah Cheno, relation to Mrs. Chen from Cedar Falls, despite the shared surname, was the lead investigator, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who had the kind of methodical thoroughness that probably made her excellent at her job and exhausting at parties. "Mr. Jameson, I want to be clear about something," she said, reviewing her notes. "What you did today was incredibly dangerous and could have gotten both you and Dr. Blackwood killed. I understand that. Do you? Because tracking down a woman who was in federal witness protection, inserting yourself into an active investigation, and confronting a known associate of organized crime suggests otherwise." Eli felt a flare of anger. She wasn't in witness protection. She was homeless and alone, hiding from people who wanted to kill her. And as far as I knew, nobody was actively investigating anything until I brought it to Sheriff Morrison's attention. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. "You're right. And for what it's worth, your actions today helped us capture a man we've been pursuing for 3 years. Marco Castellanos was wanted in connection with at least 6 murders, and we could never get close enough to build a case. What happens to him now? He's looking at federal charges for interstate stalking, making terroristic threats, conspiracy to commit murder, and about a dozen other charges. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And his family? The other Castellanos brothers? Without Marco, their operation is effectively neutered. We'll continue monitoring them, but they've lost their primary enforcer and most of their political connections. Dr. Blackwood should be safe from retaliation." The relief that flooded through Eli was so intense it was almost physical. "So she can stop running?" "She can stop running. In fact, given her cooperation today and her testimony about the original abuse case, we're prepared to help her rebuild her life. New identity if she wants it, relocation assistance, even help getting her medical license reinstated under certain circumstances. She doesn't need a new identity. She needs to go home." Agent Chen studied his face. "And where is home, Mr. Jameson?" "Cedar Falls, Colorado, with me and my daughter." "You sound very certain about that." "I am." "Have you asked Dr. Blackwood how she feels about it?" It was a fair question, and one that had been nagging at Eli throughout the long afternoon of questioning. He'd assumed Miranda would want to come back to Cedar Falls, but they hadn't actually discussed it. She'd been through her own debriefing, in a different room with different agents, and he hadn't seen her since they'd been separated at the cemetery. "Can I see her now?" Agent Chen glanced at her watch. "She should be finishing up soon. But Mr. Jameson, I want you to understand something. Dr. Blackwood has been through severe trauma, not just today, but for the past 2 years. She's going to need time to process what's happened, to figure out who she wants to be now that she doesn't have to hide anymore." "I understand." "Do you? Because the woman who's been staying in your home was, in many ways, a different person from the woman sitting in the next room. Miranda Blackwood was a successful surgeon with a full life and a career she loved. She may not want to go back to being Rowan the drifter, even if Rowan found happiness with your family." The possibility hadn't occurred to Eli, and it hit him like a cold slap. What if Miranda decided she wanted her old life back? What if she returned to Denver, rebuilt her medical career, started fresh without the baggage of her time as a homeless woman? What if she didn't want them anymore? "Can I see her?" he asked again. Agent Chen nodded and led him down a hallway to another conference room. Through the window, Eli could see Miranda sitting at a table, staring at her hands. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, but there was something different about her posture, straightness to her spine that hadn't been there when she was Rowan. "Take your time," Agent Chen said, opening the door. Miranda looked up when he entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. In the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the FBI office, she looked older, more careworn, and Eli found himself searching her face for the woman who had laughed with Maisie over homework and carved whistles from scraps of wood. "How are you holding up?" he asked, taking the chair across from her. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream, that Marco's still out there, still hunting me." "He's not. It's really over, Miranda." She flinched slightly at the name. "I'd almost forgotten that was my name. These past few weeks as Rowan, it felt like being someone else entirely." "You were someone else. You were the woman who made my daughter laugh again, who turned our house into a home." "I was pretending, playing at being normal." "No, you weren't. You were being yourself, maybe the most honest version of yourself you'd been in years." Miranda was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. "The FBI agent asked me what I want to do now, where I want to go." Eli's heart clenched. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know. For 2 years, my only goal was survival, find food, find shelter, avoid being caught. I never let myself think beyond that. And now I have choices again, real choices." She looked up at him, and he saw uncertainty in her eyes. "They said they could help me get my medical license back, find me a position at a hospital. I could be Dr. Miranda Blackwood again." "Is that what you want?" "I don't know. Part of me misses it. The surgery, the feeling of saving lives, being able to make a difference, but another part of me," she trailed off, shaking her head. "What?" "Another part of me remembers what it felt like to sit at your kitchen table, helping Maisie with her homework. What it felt like to be needed for something other than my surgical skills." Eli's heart began to race. "Miranda." Agent Chen said something interesting. She said that sometimes people emerge from trauma as different versions of themselves, and they have to decide which version they want to keep. "What do you think about that?" "I think Dr. Miranda Blackwood was a good surgeon, but she was also someone who worked 18-hour days and rarely saw her daughter. Someone who was so focused on saving other people's children that she sometimes forgot to just be present for her own." "You were a good mother, Miranda. Emma's letter proved that." "Was I? Or was I just good at compartmentalizing, at squeezing quality time into the spaces between surgeries and hospital rounds?" It was a question Eli couldn't answer for her, but he could see the war being fought behind her eyes, the professional she'd been versus the woman she'd become. "There's something else," she continued. "The FBI recovered some of Emma's things from my old house, photo albums, toys, artwork she'd made, things I thought were lost forever. That must have been overwhelming." It was. But looking through them, I realized something. The happiest pictures, the ones where Emma looked most genuinely joyful, weren't taken at fancy restaurants or expensive vacation destinations. They were taken in our kitchen, in our backyard, during quiet moments when we were just together. "What are you saying?" Miranda reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph. It showed her and Emma baking cookies, both of them covered in flour and grinning at the camera. "I'm saying that maybe the woman I was with, you and Macieth, one who had time to press flowers and carve whistles and help with homework, maybe she's closer to the mother Emma deserved than the surgeon who was always rushing off to save someone else." Eli felt hope bloom in his chest, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "So what does that mean?" "It means I don't want to be Dr. Miranda Blackwood again, at least not in the same way." She set down the photograph and looked directly at him. "Eli, do you think? Is there room in your life for someone who's still figuring out who she wants to be?" Are you asking if you can come home? I'm asking if home is still an option. After everything that's happened, after all the danger I brought into your lives. Miranda. He reached across the table and took her hands. You didn't bring danger into our lives. You brought joy. You brought laughter and warmth and the kind of happiness we'd forgotten was possible. But Marco is in custody. The threat is over. And even if it wasn't, do you really think I'd choose safety over having you in our lives? Tears began to slide down her cheeks. What about Maisie? What if she doesn't want? Are you kidding? She's been carrying around that bird you carved for her like a talisman. She wrote a letter to Santa asking him to bring you home not for Christmas presents, but because she thinks you need us as much as we need you. She wrote to Santa. She said she wanted to help you not be sad anymore. Miranda broke down then, sobbing with the kind of grief that had been held back too long. But these weren't tears of despair, they were tears of relief, of homecoming, of finally allowing herself to believe that she deserved love and happiness. I want to come home, she whispered. I want to be Maisie's, whatever she needs me to be, and I want to figure out how to love you without being terrified that I'll lose you too. You won't lose us. How can you be sure? Eli pulled out the compass his father had given him and set it on the table between them. Because some directions are true, no matter how lost you get, and you're true north for us, Miranda. You always have been. She picked up the compass, reading the inscription with shaking fingers. For finding your way when the path isn't clear. The path is clear now. It leads home, to me and Maisie, and whatever life we build together. Miranda closed her eyes, the compass clutched in her hands. When she opened them again, Eli saw something he hadn't seen since that first morning, in his kitchen pure, uncomplicated hope. There's one more thing, she said. I want to visit Emma's grave again before we leave Denver, but this time, I don't want to go alone. Of course. And I want to tell her about Maisie, about the little girl who helped her mommy remember how to smile again. They walked back to the cemetery together as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded Eli of that first snowy morning when he'd found Miranda behind his building. The world looked different, now not just because the threat was over, but because they were different. They'd been tested and found they could trust each other with the deepest truths of their lives. At Emma's grave, Miranda knelt and placed the wooden bird on the headstone. Hello, baby girl, she whispered. Mommy's sorry it took so long to come back, but I had to learn some things first. I had to learn that losing you doesn't mean I can't love again, that honoring your memory means living fully, not just surviving. She talked to Emma for several minutes, telling her about Maisie and Eli, about the whistles and the homework help, and the way families could be built from love rather than just blood. And when she was finished, she stood and took Eli's hand. Ready to go home? He asked. Ready. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Eli felt his phone buzz with a text from Sheriff Morrison. Maisie is asking when you're coming back. She says she has something special to show Rowan. Eli showed the message to Miranda, who smiled the first genuinely carefree smile he'd seen from her since the day she left Cedar Falls. I wonder what it is, she said. Knowing Maisie, it could be anything. A new drawing, a craft project. Maybe she finally finished that whistle you started teaching her to carve. Whatever it is, I can't wait to see it. And as they drove through the mountain darkness toward Cedar Falls, toward home and the little girl who was waiting for them both, Eli realized that sometimes the most important journeys weren't about finding your way to someplace new. Sometimes they were about finding your way back to the people who made you whole. 6 months later, spring had transformed Cedar Falls into something that looked like a postcard. The mountains were green again, wildflowers dotted the meadows, and the harsh edges of winter had given way to the gentle warmth of renewal. Eli stood in the backyard of their new house, a modest 3-bedroom place, with a garden plot and enough space for Maisie to run around watching Miranda teach his daughter how to identify different bird calls. They'd moved out of the apartment in February, not because they had to, but because they wanted space to grow as a family. That's a cardinal, Maisie said confidently, pointing toward the oak tree at the edge of their property. Very good. And what about that sound? Maisie cocked her head, listening intently. Robin? Exactly. You're getting very good at this. Eli smiled as he watched them together. Miranda had kept her promise to figure out who she wanted to be in this new life, and the answer had surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of returning to surgery, she'd taken a position as a nurse practitioner at the local clinic, working with Dr. Webb to provide medical care to Cedar Falls and the surrounding mountain communities. It's the right pace, she'd explained when she accepted the job. I can still help people, still use my medical training, but I'm home for dinner every night. I'm here when Maisie needs help with homework or wants to show me something she's discovered. The change suited her. The haunted look that had defined her features as Rowan was gone, replaced by a quiet contentment that grew stronger each day. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost during her months of homelessness, and her hair had grown out into a soft brown bob that framed her face beautifully. But the most remarkable change was in how she interacted with Maisie. Gone was the careful distance she'd maintained during those first weeks, the fear that getting too close might somehow hurt the child she was learning to love. Now she was fully present-helping with science projects, reading bedtime stories, teaching practical skills like cooking and gardening, and the patience required to win a bird's trust. "Daddy, come see," Maisie called out, waving him over to where she and Miranda were kneeling beside a small wooden frame. Eli joined them and saw that they'd been working on a shadow boxer display case containing pressed flowers, small stones, and other treasures from their weekend nature walks. But in the center, carefully mounted, was something that made his breath catch. It was a photograph he'd never seen before. Miranda, Maisie, and himself at the kitchen table, all three of them laughing at something that had happened outside the frame. Mrs. Chen had taken it the week before, during one of her regular visits, and somehow she'd captured a moment of pure joy. "It's our family picture," Maisie announced proudly. "Miranda helped me make the frame, and we picked all the flowers together. It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Mrs. Chen says we look like we've always been together," Maisie continued. "Like we were meant to be a family." Eli looked at Miranda and saw her eyes bright with unshed tears. They'd been having more conversations lately about making their arrangement official, not just cohabitation, but marriage, adoption, the legal bonds that would make them a family in the eyes of the law as well as in their hearts. "Speaking of families," Miranda said, reaching into her jacket pocket, "I have something to show you both." She pulled out an official-looking document, and Eli's heart began to race as he recognized the letterhead from the state adoption office. "The paperwork went through?" he asked. "This morning, if Maisie still wants me to, I can officially become her adoptive mother." Maisie's eyes went wide. "Really? You want to adopt me?" "More than anything in the world. But only if you want me to." "Yes." Maisie launched herself into Miranda's arms with enough force to knock them both backward onto the grass. "Yes, yes, yes. Can I call you Mom now?" "You can call me whatever feels right to you." "Mom," Maisie said, testing the word. "Mama Miranda, I like that." As Eli watched his daughter and the woman he loved rolling around in the grass, laughing and holding each other tight, he felt a completeness he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. This wasn't the family he'd originally planned, but it was the family they'd chosen, built from love and loss and the simple decision to take care of each other. His phone buzzed with a text from Tommy at the mill. "Heard through the grapevine that you're getting married this weekend." "About time." Eli smiled. The wedding was going to be a small affair, just family and close friends gathered in Mrs. Chen's backyard, with Sheriff Morrison officiating and Maisie serving as both flower girl and ring bearer because she'd insisted she was old enough to handle the responsibility. "What's funny?" Miranda asked, sitting up with grass in her hair and dirt on her knees. "Tommy's already heard about the wedding. I swear, news travels faster in this town than it does on the internet." "Good news travels fast," she corrected. "People are happy for us." "Are you? Happy, I mean?" It was a question he'd stopped asking months ago, but sometimes he still needed the reassurance. "Eli," Miranda said, reaching over to take his hand. 6 months ago, I was convinced I didn't deserve happiness, that I was too broken to be part of anyone's life. Now I wake up every morning in a house full of love, with a job that gives me purpose and a daughter who calls me Mama Miranda, and a husband-to-be who loves you more than he thought possible. And that, her smile was radiant. So yes, I'm happy, more than happy I'm home. That evening, as they sat on their small front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Maisie curled up between them with a book in her lap. "Read to us?" Eli asked. "It's not a little kid book," Maisie warned. "It's about a girl who goes on adventures and solves mysteries." "We like adventures," Miranda said, "and we're pretty good at solving mysteries ourselves." As Maisie began to read aloud, her voice confident and clear, Eli found himself thinking about the mystery they'd solved together, not just the question of who was hunting Miranda, but the deeper puzzle of how broken people could heal each other, how strangers could become family, how love could bloom in the most unexpected places. The wooden bird that had started it all sat on the windowsill beside them, catching the last rays of sunlight. Below it, Maisie had placed a small sign she'd made in art class, the Jameson Blackwood family home. Somewhere in the distance, a real bird called Outer Robin, by the sound of it and was answered by another, then another, until the air was filled with their songs of evening and homecoming. "Look," Miranda whispered, pointing toward the oak tree at the edge of their property. A cardinal had landed on one of the lower branches, its red feathers brilliant against the green leaves. As they watched, it was joined by two smaller birds' babies, probably just learning to fly. "A family," Maisie observed with satisfaction. "A family," Miranda agreed. And as the sun set on Cedar Falls, on their small house with its garden and its bird calls and its promises of tomorrow, Eli Jameson held the two most important people in his world and understood, finally, what Sarah would have wanted for them. Not just survival, but life. Not just getting by, but joy. Not just the memory of love, but love itself, renewed and growing stronger with each passing day. Sometimes the people we think need saving end up saving us instead. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we all save each other. In the kitchen window, Mrs. Chen's gift from the wedding shower sat in a place of honor, a small ceramic plaque with words that had become their family motto. "Home is wherever love lives." And love, as it turned out, lived everywhere in the little house on Mountain View Street, in the laughter that echoed from room to room, in the bedtime stories and weekend adventures and quiet moments of perfect contentment. It lived in the promise Eli and Miranda had made to each other just 3 days earlier, standing in Mrs. Chen's garden surrounded by friends and neighbors, to love and honor and protect each other, for better or worse, in sickness and health, for as long as they both should live. But mostly it lived in the sound of Maisie's voice calling out, "Mom, Dad, come see what I found," and the knowledge that there would always be someone to answer, someone to share in the wonder of small discoveries and large dreams. The bird carved from driftwood remained on the windowsill, a reminder of the journey that had brought them together. But now it was surrounded by other treasures, family photos, pressed flowers, small stones smooth from mountain streams, and all the accumulated evidence of a life lived fully and well. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and watchful, promising that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new opportunities to love and be loved in return. And inside their small, perfect home, 3 people who had found each other against all odds settled in for the night, safe in the knowledge that they belonged exactly where they were. Home at last.